Victoria Hale stood in the executive conference room 30 stories above the city, staring at the race broadcast on the wall-mounted screens. Her hands were shaking. The timing data made no sense. The car tearing through Sector 3 at impossible speeds carried a name she'd tried to forget for 18 months. Ethan Cole, the quiet single father she'd fired in front of HR, the dreamer she'd called a waste of resources, the engineer whose project she'd killed before it could breathe. He'd just shattered every speed record at the most prestigious desert race in North America, and she'd handed him every reason to destroy her. If you want to see how a fired single father built the impossible machine that humiliated the CEO who destroyed his career, stick around until the end of this story. And hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels across the world. The firing happened on a Tuesday morning in March, under fluorescent lights that made everything look clinical and cold. Ethan Cole sat across from Victoria Hale in the HR conference room at Titan Velocity Racing headquarters, his hands folded on the table, his expression carefully neutral. He'd known this was coming for weeks. You could feel it in the hallways, in the way people stopped making eye contact, in the sudden silence that followed him into meetings. Victoria didn't waste time on pleasantries. "We're letting you go," she said, her voice flat and businesslike. "Effective immediately." Ethan nodded slowly. "Can I ask why?" "You've been with this company for 7 years," Victoria continued, flipping through a folder without looking at him. "And in that time, you've produced exactly 0 results on the VX project. You've burned through $230,000 in R&D funding. You've missed every deadline. And when I ask you for projections, you give me theories and maybes instead of data." She finally looked up, her dark eyes cold and direct. "You're chasing a fantasy, Mr. Cole. And this company can't afford to keep funding your daydreams while we're bleeding cash and fighting for survival." Ethan took a slow breath. "The VX engine works. I've seen it work. The initial dyno test failed," Victoria interrupted, "3 times. And before you tell me about adjustments or calibration issues, let me save you the trouble. I don't care. I've read the reports. I've talked to the other engineers. Nobody believes in this project except you." She closed the folder with a sharp snap. "You're a good fabricator, Ethan. You're detail-oriented, you show up on time, and you're reliable. But you're not a visionary. You're not an innovator. You're a mechanic who got lucky once and convinced management to let you play scientist for 7 years." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "I have 6 months of new data. If you'd just look at—" "I'm done looking," Victoria said. "HR will walk you through severance and benefits. You have until 5 o'clock to clear out your workspace." She stood, smoothing the front of her blazer, already mentally moving on to the next item on her agenda. Ethan didn't move. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. Victoria paused at the door and glanced back at him with something close to pity. "No, Mr. Cole, you made the mistake. You wasted 7 years on a project that will never work. I'm just the one who finally had the guts to kill it." She left without another word. Ethan sat alone in the conference room for a long moment, staring at the empty chair across from him. Then he stood, walked out into the hallway, and went to pack his tools. Chunks. The workshop felt different that afternoon. Ethan moved through the rows of workbenches and fabrication equipment, pulling wrenches and micrometers and calipers from drawers, packing everything into a dented steel toolbox that had belonged to his father. Around him, other engineers kept their heads down, pretending not to notice. Nobody said goodbye. Nobody shook his hand. A few people glanced up as he passed. Their expressions caught somewhere between sympathy and relief that it wasn't them getting walked out. Ethan didn't blame them. Titan Velocity Racing had changed in the 6 months since Victoria Hale took over as CEO. The woman was 30 years old, ruthlessly competent, and completely uninterested in anything that didn't produce immediate, measurable results. She'd slashed budgets, restructured departments, and fired anyone who couldn't justify their existence in a quarterly earnings report. The old guard called her a tyrant. The board of directors called her a miracle worker. Ethan just called her wrong. He stopped at his workbench in the back corner of the shop, the space he'd claimed 7 years ago when the company first approved the VX project. Blueprints covered the walls. Schematics for a variable geometry intake system that could adjust airflow in real time based on engine load and atmospheric conditions. It was elegant. It was revolutionary. It was also incomplete. Ethan carefully rolled up the blueprints and slid them into a cardboard tube. He packed his notebooks, his prototype components, his test data, everything that mattered. Everything that proved the engine could work if someone just gave him the time and resources to finish it. Hey, Ethan turned. Sophie Bennett stood a few feet away holding a small USB drive. She was 24, sharp as hell, and one of the only junior engineers who'd ever taken the VX project seriously. She kept glancing toward the office windows overlooking the shop floor, nervous. "I'm not supposed to talk to you," she said quietly. "Then don't," Ethan replied, turning back to his toolbox. "I pulled the telemetry files from your last dyno test," Sophie continued, stepping closer. "The one from January, before Victoria shut everything down." Ethan paused. "There's something in the data," Sophie said. "A resonance issue in the mid-range throttle response. I think that's what caused the failure. If you isolated the variable cam timing and ran the test again with a stiffer valve spring—" "Sophie," Ethan interrupted gently, "I don't work here anymore. Shaq." "I know." She pressed the USB drive into his hand. "But you should have this anyway." Ethan looked down at the drive, then back at Sophie. "You could get fired for this." "Yeah, well," Sophie shrugged. "Somebody should believe in the thing, right?" She walked away before Ethan could respond. He stood there for a moment, gripping the USB drive, feeling the weight of everything he was about to lose. Then he finished packing, picked up his toolbox and the cardboard tube of blueprints, and walked out of Titan Velocity Racing for the last time. Ethan picked up his daughter at 3:15. Lily Cole was 8 years old, stubborn as hell, and the only good thing left in Ethan's life. She came running out of the elementary school with her backpack bouncing against her shoulders, her dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail, her face lighting up the moment she saw him waiting by the curb. "Dad!" She yanked open the passenger door of the old Ford pickup and scrambled inside. "Guess what happened in science class today?" Ethan smiled despite everything. "What happened?" "Mr. Peterson let us build catapults out of popsicle sticks and rubber bands, and mine launched a marshmallow like 15 feet across the room. Madison's broke and hit her in the face." Lily giggled. "It was awesome." "Sounds dangerous," Ethan said, pulling away from the curb. "It was science," Lily corrected him. They drove in comfortable silence for a while, the afternoon sun streaming through the windshield, the radio playing low in the background. Ethan didn't tell her about the job. Not yet. There'd be time for that conversation later when he figured out how to explain it without scaring her. "Are you okay?" Lily asked suddenly. Ethan glanced over. "Yeah, why?" "You look sad." "I'm fine, kiddo. Lily studied him with the kind of unnerving perception that 8-year-olds sometimes have, like they can see straight through the walls adults build around themselves. "Did something bad happen?" she asked. Ethan hesitated. He'd never been good at lying to her. "I lost my job today," he said quietly. Lily's eyes went wide. "They fired you?" "Yeah." "Why?" "Because the boss didn't believe in the project I was working on." Lily frowned, processing that. "The engine thing?" Yeah, the engine thing. But you said it was going to change racing forever." "I know." "So why didn't she believe you?" Ethan smiled sadly. "Sometimes people don't believe in things just because you tell them it's true. They need proof. And I didn't have enough proof yet." Lily was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Are we going to be okay?" Ethan reached over and squeezed her hand. "Yeah, we're going to be okay." He wasn't sure if he believed that, but he needed her to. That night, after Lily went to bed, Ethan sat alone in the garage behind their house and opened the cardboard tube of blueprints. The garage was small, cluttered, and poorly lit, with oil stains on the concrete floor and tools scattered across a workbench that sagged in the middle. It wasn't a real workshop. It wasn't even close. But it was all Ethan had now. He spread the schematics across the bench and studied them under the dim yellow light of a single overhead bulb. The VX engine design stared back at him. Hundreds of hours of calculations, simulations, and prototype testing distilled into a series of technical drawings that only a handful of people in the world would understand. Victoria Hale wasn't one of them. Ethan pulled Sophie's USB drive from his pocket and plugged it into his laptop. The telemetry files loaded slowly, line after line of data from the final dyno test before the project got shut down. He scrolled through the readouts, cross-referencing the numbers against his design specs, looking for the failure point Sophie had mentioned. And there it was, a resonant spike at 4,200 revolutions per minute, right in the middle of the power band. The variable intake geometry was oscillating instead of stabilizing, creating a harmonic vibration that choked airflow and killed performance. It was subtle, easy to miss. But once you saw it, the solution was obvious. Stiffer valve springs, a revised cam profile, maybe a damper system to absorb the oscillation. Ethan leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. He could fix this. It would take time, money, and resources he didn't have. But the engine wasn't a fantasy. It wasn't a daydream. It was real, and it was solvable. And Victoria Hale had fired him 6 months before he could prove it. Ethan closed his eyes and took a long, slow breath. Then he opened them, pulled a fresh notebook from the shelf, and started writing. The weeks that followed were brutal. Ethan burned through his severance pay faster than he wanted to admit. Rent, groceries, Lily's school expenses, it all added up. He picked up freelance work where he could find it, fixing cars for neighbors, doing brake jobs and oil changes in his garage for $40 a pop. It wasn't enough to live on, but it kept the lights on. And every night, after Lily went to bed, he worked on the engine. He couldn't afford to build a full prototype, so he built it in pieces. A revised intake manifold here, a new camshaft there. He scavenged parts from junkyards, bought surplus components online, and fabricated what he couldn't find. The garage slowly filled with the skeleton of something that didn't exist yet but might, if he could just hold on long enough. One Saturday morning, Ethan's phone rang while he was elbow deep in a transmission rebuild for a guy 2 streets over. "Ethan Cole," a voice said. "Yeah, who's this?" "Mason Reed." Ethan straightened, wiping grease off his hands with a shop rag. Mason Reed. He hadn't heard that name in years. "Holy shit," Ethan said. "Mason?" "Yeah, man, it's been a minute." Mason Reed had been Ethan's crew chief back when Ethan was still racing part-time in the regional circuits, before he got the engineering job at Titan Velocity and settled into a quieter life. Mason was loud, opinionated, and loyal to a fault. He ran a small independent garage on the east side of the city, doing custom builds and restorations for clients who didn't trust the big shops. "I heard you got canned," Mason said. "Word travels fast." "It's a small industry. You doing okay?" "Well, I'm surviving." "That's not what I asked." Ethan smiled despite himself. "I'm fine, Mason." "Good, because I got a proposition for you." "I'm listening." "I need a fabricator," Mason said. "Somebody who knows their way around an engine bay and doesn't mind getting their hands dirty. Pay's not great, but it's steady work. And I got space in the back if you need a place to work on your own projects." Ethan hesitated. "What kind of projects?" "The kind nobody else believes in," Mason said. "Sound familiar?" Ethan looked around his cluttered garage, at the half-built engine components scattered across the workbench, at the life he was trying to piece together out of spare parts and stubbornness. "When do I start?" he asked. Pomik. Mason's garage was a world away from Titan Velocity Racing. It was a squat cinder block building tucked between a tire shop and a used furniture store, with a hand-painted sign out front that said "Reed Customs" in faded red letters. The overhead doors were always open, spilling the smell of welding fumes and motor oil into the street. Inside, classic cars in various stages of resurrection sat on lifts and jack stands, surrounded by tools, parts, and a chaos that somehow made sense if you knew where to look. Mason himself was 52, built like a fire hydrant, and perpetually covered in grease. He met Ethan at the door with a handshake that could crack walnuts. "Welcome to the operation," Mason said, grinning. "It ain't pretty, but it's honest work." Ethan looked around. "It's perfect." "You say that now. Wait till you meet the clients." The work was simple but satisfying. Ethan rebuilt carburetors, fabricated exhaust systems, tuned engines for weekend racers who couldn't afford the big-name shops. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and Mason didn't ask questions when Ethan stayed late to work on his own projects in the back corner of the garage. Slowly, piece by piece, the VX engine started to take shape. Ethan revised the intake geometry based on Sophie's telemetry data. He machined new camshafts on Mason's old lathe. He fabricated a prototype cylinder head and hand-ported the intake runners until the airflow was perfect. It was painstaking work, done in stolen hours after midnight, fueled by coffee and the stubborn belief that the engine would work if you could just get it right. Mason noticed, of course. One night, 3 months after Ethan started at the garage, Mason walked over to the corner workbench and stood watching Ethan torque down a cylinder head. "That the engine that got you fired?" Mason asked. Ethan didn't look up. "Yeah. What makes you think it'll work now?" "Because I know it was wrong." Mason nodded slowly. "You need help?" Ethan paused, wrench in hand, and finally looked up. "You serious?" "Hell yeah, I'm serious. I didn't give you space back here just to watch you kill yourself working alone." Mason grinned. "Besides, I got nothing better to do." Ethan smiled. "All right, let's do it." Building the engine became a partnership. Mason helped fabricate the intake manifold on the CNC mill he'd bought secondhand from a bankrupt machine shop. He welded the custom exhaust headers while Ethan assembled the valve train. They worked late into the night, arguing over tolerances and clearances and compression ratios, pushing each other to get the details right. It felt like the old days, back when racing was still fun, and the only thing that mattered was making the car faster than it was yesterday. "You ever think about racing this thing?" Mason asked one night, wiping sweat off his forehead with a shop rag. Ethan shook his head. "I don't have the money for a car, let alone a racing program." "What if you did?" "Then I still wouldn't have a driver." Mason grinned. "What if I told you I know a guy?" Ethan looked up. "What guy?" "Lucas Kane." The name hit Ethan like a punch to the chest. Lucas Kane. He hadn't heard that name in years. Lucas Kane had been one of the best drivers in American endurance racing a decade ago. Fast, fearless, and smart behind the wheel. He'd driven for factory teams, won championships, and built a reputation as someone who could drag a car across the finish line through sheer willpower. Then a crash at Sebring ended his career, shattered his left leg, and sent him into early retirement. "I thought Lucas was done racing," Ethan said. "He was, but I ran into him last month at a swap meet. He's broke, bitter, and looking for one last shot at something that matters." Mason shrugged. "Sounds like he'd fit right in with us." Ethan stared at the half-built engine on the workbench, at the years of work and failure and stubborn belief sitting in front of him, and felt something shift in his chest. Maybe this wasn't just about proving Victoria Hale wrong. Maybe it was about proving to himself that the dream was worth chasing in the first place. "Set up a meeting," Ethan said. Lucas Kane walked into Mason's garage on a Thursday afternoon, limping slightly on his left leg, his face weathered and hard in a way that only comes from years of disappointment. He was 41 years old, gray creeping into his temples, his eyes sharp and skeptical as he looked around the cluttered shop. "So you're the guy who wants to go racing," Lucas said, stopping in front of Ethan's workbench. "That's me," Ethan replied. Lucas studied the engine components spread across the bench. The custom intake manifold, the hand-ported cylinder head, the revised camshafts. He didn't say anything for a long moment. "What is this?" he finally asked. "A variable geometry intake system," Ethan said. "It adjusts airflow in real time based on engine load and atmospheric pressure. It's faster, more efficient, and more responsive than anything else on the market." "Does it work?" "Not yet." Well, Lucas laughed, short and bitter. "So you want me to drive an unproven engine in an unbuilt car with no sponsors and no support team? That about right?" "Yeah," Ethan said. "That's about right." Lucas shook his head. "You're out of your mind." "Probably." "I don't do charity cases, man. I'm done wasting my time on projects that go nowhere." "This isn't a charity case," Ethan said quietly. "This is the engine that's going to change racing. I just need someone good enough to prove it." Lucas met his eyes, and for the first time something flickered in his expression. Not hope, exactly, but curiosity. "Who are you?" Lucas asked. "Ethan Cole. I used to work at Titan Velocity Racing until the CEO fired me for chasing impossible ideas. And now you're building the impossible idea in a garage." "Yeah." Lucas smiled, slow and tired. "Hell, why not?" He held out his hand. Ethan shook it. And just like that, the team was born. The next 6 months were chaos. Ethan, Mason, and Lucas worked around the clock, building the car piece by piece in the back of Mason's garage. They started with a stripped-down chassis from an old GT3 car that Mason bought at auction for $3,000. They reinforced the frame, fabricated custom suspension components, and rebuilt the drivetrain from scratch to handle the power the VX engine was supposed to produce. It was slow, expensive, and exhausting. Ethan maxed out his credit cards. Mason cashed in favors from suppliers. Lucas sold his old race trophies to cover parts costs. They scraped and hustled and fought to keep the project alive. And more than once, Ethan wondered if Victoria Hale had been right all along, that he was just a dreamer chasing a fantasy that would never work. But every time doubt crept in, he thought about Lily, about the future he wanted to build for her, about the promise he'd made to himself that he wouldn't quit until the engine proved itself one way or the other. And then, one night in November, they fired it up for the first time. Ethan hit the starter. The engine turned over once, twice, then roared to life with a sound unlike anything he'd ever heard, deep, smooth, and powerful. The variable intake system cycling through its range with mechanical precision. Mason whooped. Lucas grinned. Ethan just stood there, hands shaking, listening to the engine run. It worked. The dyno test 2 days later confirmed what Ethan already knew. The VX engine produced 640 horsepower, 60 more than the factory race engines running in the same class, with better throttle response, better fuel efficiency, and a power band that stretched from 3,500 to 8,500 revolutions per minute without a single dead spot. It was perfect. "We need to race this thing," Lucas said, staring at the dyno printout. Mason nodded. "The Desert Nationals are in 3 months. Open entry, no restrictions. If we can get the car finished..." "We'll get it finished," Ethan interrupted. He looked at Lucas and Mason, at the car sitting half-built in the garage, at the engine that had nearly destroyed his life and career. "We're going racing," Ethan said. 3 months later, the team loaded the car onto a flatbed trailer and drove 16 hours across 2 states to the Desert Nationals in Nevada. It was one of the last true open-format racing events in North America, a brutal 3-hour endurance race through a 40-mile desert circuit where factory teams, privateers, and independents all competed on equal ground. The prize money was decent, the prestige was better, and the entry list read like a who's who of professional racing, including Titan Velocity Racing. Ethan tried not to think about that. They set up camp in the far corner of the paddock, in a tiny garage bay between a hobbyist team from Oregon and a college engineering program. Nobody paid attention to them. Nobody asked questions. They were just another no-name independent team with a homemade car and impossible dreams. Ethan spent the night before the race going over the engine one last time, checking tolerances, inspecting welds, making sure everything was perfect. Lucas stretched his bad leg and tried not to look nervous. Mason paced back and forth, muttering to himself. "You ready for this?" Mason asked. Ethan looked at the car, the machine that had cost him his job, his savings, and 18 months of his life. "Yeah, Ostman," he said. "I'm ready." The race started at dawn. The desert air was already hot by 6 in the morning when the cars rolled onto the grid. Ethan stood in the garage bay doorway, watching the procession of race machines move past their position. Factory teams with matching transporter trucks and pit crews wearing sponsor logos. Professional operations with engineers carrying laptops and telemetry equipment. $1 million budgets wrapped in carbon fiber and aerodynamic bodywork. And then there was their car. Lucas sat in the cockpit running through pre-race checks, his voice crackling over the radio headset Mason wore. The engine idled with that deep, smooth sound Ethan had heard 1,000 times in the garage, but never out here. Never surrounded by competition, never with everything on the line. "Oil pressure good," Lucas said. "Temps are climbing but still in range. Brakes feel solid." "Copy that," Mason replied, checking his watch. 15 minutes to green flag, set. Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from Lily, sent the night before because she'd be asleep when the race started. "Good luck, Dad. You're going to do great. Love you." He closed his eyes for a second, steadying himself, then walked over to the car. Lucas looked up through the window netting, his helmet already on, his expression unreadable behind the visor. "You good?" Ethan asked. "I'm good. The engine's going to perform different than anything you've driven before. The power band is wider, the throttle response is sharper. Don't fight it, just trust it." Lucas nodded. "I trust it." And if something goes wrong, nothing's going wrong, Lucas interrupted. We built this thing right. Now let me go drive it. Ethan stepped back as Mason gave the signal. The crew pushed the car toward the grid, and Ethan followed on foot, weaving through the organized chaos of the paddock as teams made final adjustments and drivers climbed into cockpits. Then he saw her. Victoria Hale stood beside the Titan Velocity Racing Transporter, 50 yards away across the paddock, talking to one of the team engineers. She wore a fitted blazer despite the heat, her dark hair pulled back, her posture perfect even at dawn in the middle of the Nevada desert. She hadn't seen him yet. Ethan kept walking, keeping his head down, focusing on the car ahead of him. The last thing he needed right now was a confrontation with the woman who'd fired him 18 months ago. But as he passed the Titan Velocity pit area, one of the engineers glanced over and did a double take. "Holy shit," the guy muttered. "Is that Ethan Cole?" Victoria's head snapped around. For a moment, their eyes met across the paddock. Her expression shifted through surprise, confusion, and then something harder to read. She started to move toward him, but Ethan was already walking away, following his team's car toward the grid. Mason caught up to him, breathing hard. "Was that her?" "Yeah." "She see you?" "Yeah." "Well, shit." Mason grinned. "Guess we better put on a show." They reached the grid position near the back of the pack, 32nd out of 42 entries. The factory teams lined up at the front with their polished machines and professional pit crews. The independent teams filled in the gaps behind them, hoping for a miracle, or at least a clean finish. Ethan stood beside the car as the officials began clearing the grid. Lucas sat motionless in the cockpit, hands on the wheel, staring at the track ahead. "Bring it home," Ethan said quietly. Lucas gave a thumbs up without looking over. The crews cleared off the grid. The pace car pulled away. The starter stood on the flag stand, green flag in hand. Ethan's heart was hammering so hard he could feel it in his throat. The flag dropped. 42 engines screamed to life, and the pack surged forward into turn 1. Lucas got a decent start, threading through traffic as the field compressed into the first corner. The car moved smoothly, the engine pulling hard through the gears. Ethan watched on the timing monitors as Lucas clicked off the opening lap, settling into 31st position, staying clean, feeling out the car. "How's it feel?" Mason asked over the radio. "It feels fast," Lucas replied, and Ethan could hear the grin in his voice. The first 20 laps were survival. The pack spread out as the faster cars pushed to the front and the slower ones fell back. Lucas worked his way through traffic, picking off positions where he could, staying patient, letting the car prove itself. The engine temperatures held steady. The oil pressure stayed solid. Everything was working exactly the way it was supposed to work. By lap 30, Lucas was running 23rd. By lap 50, he was 18th. And then he hit the main straightaway for the first time at full speed, and everything changed. "Jesus Christ," Lucas said over the radio, his voice tight with adrenaline. "This thing is a rocket." Ethan watched the data on Mason's laptop as the car accelerated down the straight. 140. 150. 160. The variable intake system cycled through its range, optimizing airflow as the engine climbed toward redline. The speed kept building, smooth and relentless, as Lucas blew past 2 cars like they were standing still. "Sector 3, 2.1 seconds faster than our previous best," Mason reported. "That puts us in the top 10 for that sector." "Top 10?" Ethan repeated. Mason checked the screen again. "Yeah, faster than half the factory teams." They looked at each other. "Holy shit," Mason whispered. Lap after lap, Lucas kept pushing, and the car kept delivering. He carved through the technical sections with precision and then unleashed the full power of the VX engine on the straights, closing gaps that should have been impossible to close. The other teams started to notice. Pit crews turned to watch as the unknown car with the homemade livery came screaming past their pit boxes, eating up ground on machines that cost 10 times as much. By lap 75, Lucas was running 12th. By lap 90, he was 8th. And the leaders were starting to come into view. "Talk to me," Lucas said over the radio, breathing hard. "What's the gap to 7th? Mason checked the timing screen. 11 seconds. It's the Titan Velocity car. There was a pause on the radio. "Copy that," Lucas said. "Let's go get him." Ethan's stomach twisted. The Titan Velocity car. The team that fired him. the organization that called his project a fantasy and his work a waste of resources. "Take your time," Ethan said into the radio. "Don't do anything stupid." "I'm not doing anything stupid," Lucas replied. "I'm just driving the car you built." And with that, he dropped the hammer. The gap to 7th place started shrinking. 10 seconds. 9. 8. The Titan Velocity driver was good, smooth and consistent, but the car couldn't match the raw speed of the VX engine. Lucas closed the gap through the technical sections and then launched down the main straight like he'd been shot out of a cannon. 7 seconds. 6. 5. The crowd around the timing monitor started to grow as other teams noticed what was happening. Engineers with clipboards, mechanics in stained coveralls, even a few drivers who'd already retired from the race. They stood watching the lap times, murmuring to each other, trying to figure out who the hell was driving the car in 8th place. 4 seconds, Mason called. "He's right on him." Oh. Lucas caught the Titan Velocity car coming out of turn 11, diving inside on the brakes, holding his line as the two cars ran side by side through turn 12. For a moment, they were door to door, neither giving an inch. Then Lucas's engine pulled harder coming onto the straight, and he cleared the Titan Velocity car before the next corner. 7th place, Mason said, grinning. "You just passed Titan Velocity." "Good," Lucas replied. "Who's next?" The race became a blur after that. Lucas picked off 6th place on lap 103, 5th place on lap 112. The car never faltered. The engine never missed a beat. Everything Ethan had designed, everything he'd built in that garage over 18 months of doubt and failure and stubborn belief, was working exactly the way it was supposed to work. But the real moment came on lap 125, when Lucas hit the main straight and the timing officials thought their equipment was broken. The sector time flashed on the screen. Then it flashed again. Then a race official came over the radio, asking Mason to confirm their transponder was working correctly. "It's working fine," Mason said, barely able to contain his excitement. "What's the problem?" "Your Sector 3 time just came up faster than the current lap record," the official replied. "We need to verify the data." Ethan stared at the screen, not quite believing what he was reading. They'd just broken the track record, not matched it, not come close, shattered it by 0.3 of a second. Around them, the crowd of onlookers had grown into something resembling a gathering. People were pointing at the timing screen, pulling out phones, taking pictures. Word was spreading through the paddock that something impossible was happening at the back of the grid. "Mason," Lucas said over the radio, his voice steady despite the speed he was carrying. "What's the gap to the leaders?" Mason checked the screen. "You're 4th. The gap to 3rd is 18 seconds. "We got fuel to chase it?" Mason looked at Ethan. Ethan did the math in his head. Fuel load, consumption rate, remaining laps. It was going to be close. Too close. They could make it to the finish if Lucas backed off and conserved fuel, or they could push for the podium and risk running dry in the final laps. "Tell him to go for it," Ethan said. Mason keyed the radio. "You got clearance. Go get 3rd. Yes. Copy," Lucas replied. "Let's finish this." The final 30 laps of the race were the longest of Ethan's life. Lucas drove like a man possessed, shaving 0.1 of a second off every lap, carving through corners with surgical precision, trusting the car to do things no independent team had any right to ask of a homemade machine. The gap to 3rd place dropped lap by lap, 18 seconds to 15 to 12 to 9. The other teams were watching now. Engineers stood at the pit wall, timing screens in hand, trying to figure out what kind of engine could produce that kind of speed. Photographers lined the main straight, cameras tracking the car with the strange livery as it screamed past at speeds that didn't make sense. And somewhere in the Titan Velocity pit area, Victoria Hale stood staring at the timing monitors with an expression Ethan would have paid money to see up close. 6 seconds, Mason called. "You're closing." Lucas didn't respond. He was in the zone now, completely focused, attacking every corner like it was the last lap of his career. 5 seconds. 4. 3. With 10 laps remaining, Lucas caught 3rd place coming into the chicane, stuffed the nose inside on the brakes, and forced the other driver to give him room. The two cars banged wheels briefly, then Lucas was clear, pulling away into 3rd position. The crowd erupted. Mason grabbed Ethan by the shoulders, shaking him, yelling something that Ethan couldn't hear over the noise. They were on the podium. The unknown independent team from the back of the grid, The team with no sponsors and no budget and no business being here was about to finish third at one of the most prestigious desert races in North America. Lucas brought the car home in third place with 2 gallons of fuel left in the tank and a lap record that would stand for years. When he climbed out of the cockpit in the paddock, his face was flushed and his hands were shaking and he couldn't stop grinning. "That car is a fucking masterpiece," he said, pulling off his helmet. Ethan just stood there, stunned, trying to process what had just happened. "We did it," Mason said, his voice cracking slightly. "We actually did it. Mashi. Yes." Around them, the paddock had transformed into chaos. Photographers pushed forward, trying to get shots of the car. Officials checked the transponder data, still not quite believing the sector times were real. Other teams sent engineers over to get a closer look at the engine, hoping to figure out what kind of black magic the car was running. And through it all, Ethan saw Victoria Hale walking toward them. She moved through the crowd with purpose, her expression unreadable, her eyes fixed on Ethan. People stepped aside to let her pass, recognizing the CEO of one of the biggest racing organizations in the country. She stopped 10 feet away. "Ethan," she said. "Victoria." The silence stretched between them, heavy and awkward. Mason and Lucas stood to the side, watching, not sure whether to intervene or give them space. "That's your engine," Victoria said, glancing at the car. It wasn't a question. "Yeah," Ethan replied. "That's my engine." "The VX project." "Yeah." Victoria looked at him for a long moment, and Ethan couldn't read the expression on her face. Anger, regret, respect? Maybe all three. "We need to talk," she said finally. "About what?" "About the fact that you just humiliated every professional team here with a machine you built in a garage." She glanced at Mason and Lucas, "Including mine." "I wasn't trying to humiliate anyone," Ethan said. "I was just trying to prove the engine works." "Well, congratulations," Victoria said, her voice tight. "You proved it." She turned and walked away before Ethan could respond. Mason let out a low whistle. "That went well." "Shut up," Ethan muttered, but the encounter stuck with him through the rest of the afternoon. The podium ceremony, the interviews with racing journalists who wanted to know where the car came from and who the hell Ethan Cole was. The other teams asking questions about the engine design, most of which Ethan deflected because he wasn't ready to give away his secrets yet. Through it all, he kept thinking about the look on Victoria's face. Not anger, not dismissiveness, something closer to regret. The paddock slowly emptied as the afternoon turned to evening. Teams packed up their equipment, loaded cars onto trailers, and disappeared into the desert twilight. Mason, Lucas, and Ethan stayed late, going over the car one last time, checking for damage, making sure everything was secure for the long drive home. "You know what this means, right?" Lucas said, wiping grease off his hands. "What?" Ethan asked. "We're not done. Not even close." Lucas gestured at the car. "This thing is too good to just walk away from. We need to keep racing." "With what money?" Ethan said. "We're broke." "We won't be broke for long," Mason said, holding up his phone. "I got 3 emails in the last hour from sponsors asking about partnership opportunities. And some journalist from Motorsport Weekly wants to do a feature story on the team." Ethan stared at him. "Seriously? Oi, seriously." Mason grinned. "You built something special, man. People are paying attention now." Ethan looked at the car, at the machine that had nearly destroyed his life and career, at the dream he'd refused to let die. "We'll need a real shop," he said slowly. "Better equipment, a proper fabrication setup." "We'll figure it out," Lucas said. "And we'll need funding. A lot of funding." "We'll figure that out too." Ethan smiled despite himself. "You guys are insane." "What?" "Says the guy who built a race-winning engine in his garage," Mason shot back. They finished packing up as the last light faded from the sky. The desert stretched out around them, vast and empty and beautiful in the way only Nevada can be. Ethan stood beside the car for a moment, letting the reality of what they'd accomplished sink in. They'd finished third. They'd broken the lap record. They'd proven the engine worked. And Victoria Hale had seen all of it. Ethan pulled out his phone and texted Lily. "We finished third. I'll tell you all about it when I get home. Love you, kiddo." The reply came back almost immediately. "I knew you could do it. Can I tell everyone at school?" Ethan smiled. "Yeah, you can tell everyone at school. They loaded the car onto the trailer and started the long drive home through the desert night. Mason drove while Lucas slept in the passenger seat, exhausted from 3 hours of wheel-to-wheel racing. Ethan sat in the back of the truck cab, staring out the window at the empty highway, his mind already racing ahead to the next race, the next challenge, the next impossible thing they'd have to figure out. But for now, just for tonight, he let himself feel something he hadn't felt in a long time: pride. The weeks after the Desert Nationals were a whirlwind. The feature story in Motorsport Weekly hit newsstands and exploded across social media. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know about the single father who built a championship-caliber engine in his garage and took on the factory teams with nothing but stubbornness and skill. The article included photos of the team, quotes from Lucas about the car's performance, and a detailed breakdown of the race results that made it clear this wasn't a fluke. The sponsorship offers started rolling in. Some were small, local businesses wanting their logo on the car for a few $1,000s. Others were bigger, parts suppliers offering free components in exchange for brand visibility. And a few were serious, legitimate racing sponsors with deep pockets who saw potential in the underdog story. Mason fielded most of the calls while Ethan focused on the engine. There were improvements to make, data to analyze, weaknesses to address. The VX system had performed brilliantly at the Desert Nationals, but one race wasn't enough. They needed consistency, reliability, proof that the engine could survive a full season of competition. Sophie Bennett reached out 3 weeks after the race. Ethan was in Mason's garage rebuilding the cylinder head for the next race when his phone rang with an unknown number. "Hello? Ethan, it's Sophie from Titan Velocity." Ethan straightened, surprised. "Sophie, hey, how'd you get my number? I still have your old contact info from when we worked together." She paused. "I saw the race results. Congratulations." "Thanks. I couldn't have done it without the telemetry data you gave me." Bossi. "I know." Sophie's voice dropped lower, like she was worried someone might overhear. "Listen, I need to talk to you about something. Can we meet?" Ethan glanced around the garage. "Sure. When?" "Tonight? There's a diner off Highway 12, about halfway between the city and where you are. I'll buy you coffee." "All right, 7 o'clock?" 7 o'clock. She hung up before Ethan could ask what this was about. The diner was one of those classic roadside places with red vinyl booths and a neon sign that flickered in the dark. Ethan arrived first, ordered coffee, and sat by the window watching headlights pass on the highway. Sophie showed up 10 minutes later looking nervous. She slid into the booth across from him and ordered coffee without looking at the menu. "You okay?" Ethan asked. "I don't know," Sophie said. "Maybe." "What's going on, sup?" She pulled a folded piece of paper from her jacket and slid it across the table. Ethan unfolded it and saw a resignation letter addressed to Victoria Hale. "You're quitting?" he asked. "I'm thinking about it." Sophie wrapped her hands around the coffee cup the waitress brought over. Titan Velocity isn't what it used to be. Ever since Victoria took over, it's all about efficiency and cost-cutting and quarterly reports. Nobody's allowed to take risks anymore. Nobody's allowed to try anything new. "That's why she fired me," Ethan said. "I know, and she was wrong." Sophie looked up, her eyes intense. "You proved she was wrong. That engine you built is better than anything we're running at Titan. And when I saw the race results, I realized I'm wasting my time working for someone who can't see past a spreadsheet." Ethan folded the letter and slid it back across the table. "So what do you want from me?" I want to work for you." Ethan blinked. "What?" "What? I want to join your team. I'm a good engineer, Ethan. You know I am, and I believe in what you're building." Sophie leaned forward. "You're going to need help if you want to keep racing. Better data analysis, better telemetry systems, someone who can manage the technical side while you focus on development. Sophie, I can't afford to pay you." I don't care about the money right now. I care about working on something that matters." Ethan stared at her, caught off guard by the intensity in her voice. This was the same junior engineer who'd slipped him telemetry data 18 months ago, risking her job to help him. The same person who'd believed in the VX project when nobody else would. "If you quit Titan Velocity, Victoria's going to know you're working with me," Ethan said. "She's going to see it as betrayal." Sophie shrugged. "Let her. I'm done letting her control my career." "Well, Asharami, Ethan thought about it for a long moment. The team was growing faster than he'd expected. The sponsorship money was starting to come in. They had opportunities for more races, bigger races, events where they'd need professional level support to compete, and he trusted Sophie. "All right," he said finally. "You're in." Sophie's face lit up. "Seriously?" "Seriously, but we do this right. You give Titan Velocity 2 weeks' notice. You leave professionally, and you don't burn any bridges you might need later. Deal." They shook hands across the table. 2 weeks later, Sophie walked into Mason's garage carrying a laptop bag and a box of engineering textbooks, ready to work. Mason took one look at her and grinned. "Well, shit. We got ourselves a real engineer now." "You had a real engineer before, son," Ethan said. "Now you have two." The team dynamic shifted with Sophie's arrival. She set up a proper data analysis system, installing software that tracked engine performance in real time and flagged potential issues before they became failures. She organized the shop, creating inventory systems and maintenance schedules that kept everything running smoothly. And she pushed Ethan to think bigger, to consider not just the next race, but the full season, the championship, the long-term strategy. "We need to enter the Western Endurance Series," Sophie said one afternoon, pulling up the schedule on her laptop. 6 races over 4 months, prize money scales with finishing position. If we can place in the top 5 consistently, we'll have enough funding to keep operating. "That's a big if," Lucas said. He was stretched out on a creeper under the car, replacing the rear differential. "Those races are brutal, 3 hours minimum. Some of them go for 6. The car can handle it," Sophie replied. "The engine's proven. We just need to make sure the rest of the systems are reliable." Ethan looked at the schedule. The Western Endurance Series was legitimate professional racing. Factory teams, experienced drivers, circuits that tested every aspect of a car's performance. It was a massive step up from the Desert Nationals. It was also exactly what they needed. "We'll need a bigger budget," he said. "I'm working on it," Mason replied. "I got a meeting next week with a potential sponsor, Regional Auto Parts Chain. They're interested in backing an independent team." "How interested?" "Interested enough to ask for a face-to-face meeting." Ethan nodded slowly. "All right, let's do it. Sign us up for the series." Sophie grinned and started typing. The first race of this Western Endurance Series was at Cascade Raceway, a technical circuit carved into the foothills east of the city. Ethan, Mason, Sophie, and Lucas arrived 2 days early to set up and practice. The paddock was a different world compared to the Desert Nationals. Professional teams with matching semi-trucks, engineers with tablet computers and telemetry rigs, drivers who'd been racing since they were teenagers. The level of competition was higher, the stakes were bigger, and the expectations were brutal. Their little independent team looked out of place parked between 2 factory operations. But they'd been out of place before. "All right," Mason said, gathering everyone around the car on race morning. "We know what we're up against. We know people are watching to see if the Desert Nationals was a fluke. So let's go out there and show them it wasn't." Lucas climbed into the cockpit. Sophie powered up the telemetry systems. Ethan did one final check of the engine. And when the green flag dropped, Lucas went to work. The car ran flawlessly through the opening stint, holding 6th place and matching lap times with teams that had 10 times the budget. Sophie monitored the data from pit lane, calling out tire temperatures and fuel consumption while Mason coordinated pit strategy. They finished 4th. Not a fluke. The second race at Ridgeline Circuit 2 weeks later, they finished 3rd. Still not a fluke. By the 3rd race, the other teams stopped dismissing them as lucky amateurs and started treating them as legitimate competition. Engineers asked questions about the engine. Drivers watched Lucas's lines through corners. Journalists wanted interviews. And Victoria Hale showed up at the 4th race. Ethan saw her walking through the paddock on Saturday morning, flanked by 2 Titan Velocity engineers. She stopped at their pit area and stood watching as Sophie and Mason prepped the car for practice. Ethan walked over, wiping his hands on a shop rag. "Victoria." "Ethan." She glanced at the car. "I see you picked up some help." "Sophie's a good engineer." "I know. She worked for me." Victoria's voice was tight, until she decided to quit and join your operation. She made that choice herself. "I'm sure she did." Victoria crossed her arms. "You're making a name for yourself. 4th place, 3rd place, consistent top 5 finishes. That's impressive for an independent team." "Thank you." But you're not going to win a championship like this, Victoria continued. You're scraping by on sponsorship money and luck. You're one blown engine away from bankruptcy. And eventually, the competition's going to figure out your systems and catch up. Ethan met her eyes. Is there a point to this conversation? Victoria hesitated, and for the first time since he'd known her, she looked uncertain. I want to make you an offer, she said finally. Ethan waited. Come back to Titan Velocity. Bring your engine, bring your team, bring everything. We'll give you a proper budget, a real workshop, full factory support. You'll have the resources to develop the VX system properly and compete at the highest level. In exchange for what? In exchange for Titan Velocity owning the rights to the engine design, Victoria said, and you working under company oversight. Ethan stared at her, processing the offer. It was everything he had needed 18 months ago. Resources, support, legitimacy, but it came with a price. I appreciate the offer, Ethan said carefully, but I'm not interested. Victoria's expression hardened. Don't be stupid, Ethan. This is the best deal you're going to get. Maybe. But it's not the right deal. Ethan gestured at the car, at Mason, Sophie, and Lucas working together. We built this from nothing. We proved the engine works on our terms, without anyone telling us it was impossible. And I'm not giving that up to work for someone who fired me for believing in it. I made a mistake, Victoria said, her voice quiet. Ethan looked at her, surprised. I made a mistake, she repeated. I should have supported the project. I should have given you more time. But I was under pressure from the board, and I made the decision I thought was right for the company. And now you want to fix that mistake by buying me out. I want to fix it by giving you what you need to succeed. Ethan shook his head. I don't need you to give me anything, Victoria. I already have what I need. He walked away before she could respond. That conversation haunted him for days. Part of him wondered if he'd made the right choice. Titan Velocity had resources, connections, and funding that his independent team could only dream of. Turning down that offer meant continuing to operate on a shoestring budget, gambling on race results, living one mechanical failure away from disaster. But another part of him knew that accepting would have meant giving up control, giving up ownership, giving up the dream that had carried him through 18 months of doubt and struggle. And he wasn't ready to do that. Not yet. The team kept racing. The fifth race of the Western Endurance Series took place at Silver Point International, a fast circuit known for destroying engines and breaking teams that weren't prepared for the punishment. It was a 6-hour endurance race, the longest of the season, and the attrition rate was brutal. Ethan spent the week before the race tearing down the VX engine completely, inspecting every component, replacing anything that showed even the slightest wear. Sophie ran simulation after simulation, calculating fuel loads and pit stop strategies, trying to find the optimal balance between speed and reliability. We need to finish this race, she said on Thursday night, staring at her laptop screen in the garage. Even if we finish 10th, we need to finish. Too many retirements and we're out of championship contention. The car will finish, Lucas said. He was sitting on a stack of tires, icing his bad leg. The long races were taking their toll on him, but he refused to admit it. Just keep it running and I'll bring it home. Your leg's getting worse, Ethan observed. My leg's fine. Lucas, it's fine, Lucas snapped. Then he softened slightly. Look, I know what I signed up for. 6-hour races aren't easy on anybody, but I'm not tapping out now. Not when we're this close. Mason walked over carrying Chinese takeout containers. Close to what? We're sitting 5th in the championship. 3 races left. The top 4 teams all have better funding, better equipment, and drivers who aren't held together with scar tissue and stubbornness. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Lucas muttered. I'm just being realistic. Mason handed out the food. We've done great. Better than great. But we're playing a different game than the factory teams. At some point, that's going to catch up to us. What up or such? Ethan didn't respond. He knew Mason was right. They'd pushed the car and the team further than anyone expected, but they were operating at the absolute limit of what was possible on their budget. One major mechanical failure, one crash, one mistake, and everything they'd built would collapse. But they'd been on the edge of collapse since the beginning. We finished Silver Point, Ethan said finally. Then we worry about the rest. The morning of the race was overcast and humid, the kind of weather that made engines run hot and drivers sweat through their suits before the green flag even dropped. Ethan walked the paddock alone before dawn, watching the professional teams go through their meticulous preparation routines. He stopped when he saw Victoria Hale's rental car parked near the Titan Velocity transporter. She was here again. Ethan considered walking past, avoiding another confrontation, but then he saw her standing alone by the pit wall, staring out at the empty track. Something about her posture looked different, less certain, less controlled. He walked over. "You're up early," Ethan said. Victoria glanced at him, unsurprised. "Couldn't sleep." "Race day nerves?" "Something like that." She turned back to the track. "How's your team doing?" "We're ready." "That's not what I asked." Ethan leaned against the pit wall beside her. "Lucas's leg is bothering him more than he'll admit. Sophie's running on 3 hours of sleep. Mason's worried we're going to blow the engine. And I'm standing here talking to the woman who fired me instead of focusing on the race." Victoria almost smiled. "So business as usual." "Pretty much." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the sky lighten over the circuit. "I've been thinking about your offer," Ethan said. Victoria looked at him sharply. "And?" "And I'm still not interested, but I appreciate that you made it." "Why?" Victoria asked. "Why turn down everything you need to succeed?" "Because it's not everything I need," Ethan replied. "I need to finish what I started on my own terms. I need to prove that the engine works without someone standing over my shoulder telling me how to do it. And I need to show my daughter that you don't give up on something you believe in just because it gets hard." Victoria was quiet for a long time. "You really think you can win the championship?" she said finally. "I think we have a shot." "Against Titan Velocity?" "Against everybody." Victoria shook her head slowly. "You're either the most stubborn person I've ever met or the most naive." "Probably both," Ethan admitted. The loudspeakers crackled to life across the paddock, announcing 1 hour to grid formation. Ethan pushed off the pit wall, preparing to head back to his team. "Ethan," Victoria called. He stopped. "I hope you prove me wrong," she said quietly. "I really do." Ethan nodded and walked away. The 6-hour race at Silver Point was a war of attrition from the first lap. Lucas started in 8th position, driving conservatively through the opening stint, letting the more aggressive teams fight for position while he focused on tire preservation and fuel economy. The strategy was simple: survive the chaos, stay out of trouble, and capitalize when other teams made mistakes. And mistakes came fast. By lap 20, 2 cars had already retired with mechanical failures. By lap 40, a multi-car crash in turn 7 took out 3 more competitors, including one of the championship favorites. The safety car came out twice in the first hour, compressing the field and creating opportunities for teams with good pit strategy. Sophie called Lucas in for the first stop on lap 62, just before a yellow flag that would have trapped them a lap down. They changed tires, added fuel, and got him back out in 6th position with minimal time loss. "Nice call," Mason said, watching the timing screen. "Just paying attention," Sophie replied. "Boss is same room." But Ethan could see the relief on her face. Lucas clicked off lap after lap with mechanical precision, maintaining 6th place through the second hour, then moving up to 5th when the car ahead suffered a brake failure coming into turn 12. The VX engine ran flawlessly, temperatures holding steady despite the humid conditions, power delivery smooth and consistent. 3 hours into the race, they were running 4th. "Talk to me about the leg," Ethan said over the radio during a yellow flag period. "It's fine," Lucas replied, but his voice sounded strained. "Lucas, I said it's fine. How's the car?" Sophie checked the telemetry. "Everything looks good. Oil pressure's solid. Temps are normal. Tire wear is within projections." "Then let's keep racing." The 4th hour was when things started getting difficult. The heat was brutal, both inside the cockpit and under the hood. Lucas's lap times began to slip slightly as fatigue set in. The car was still fast, still reliable, but the physical toll of wrestling a race car through turn after turn for hours was starting to show. "You need to pit for a driver change," Mason said. "We don't have another driver." Lucas shot back. "Then we need to slow down. You're going to hurt yourself." "I'm fine." "Nate?" "You're not fine," Ethan interrupted. "Your lap times are dropping. You're missing apexes. If you keep pushing like this, you're going to crash." I'm not going to crash. Lucas, I said I'm fine. Lucas's voice cracked slightly. Just let me drive the damn car. Ethan exchanged looks with Mason and Sophie. They were stuck. Lucas was right. They didn't have another driver. The rules allowed driver changes, but finding someone qualified who could hop into an unfamiliar car mid-race wasn't realistic. They had to trust him to finish. All right, Ethan said quietly. But if you feel like you're losing it, you tell us. No hero shit. Copy, Lucas replied. The fifth hour was when Titan Velocity Racing made their move. Their lead car had been running second all day, methodical and fast, waiting for the right moment to strike. And with 90 minutes remaining, their driver saw an opening and went for it. The battle for the lead lasted 20 laps, two cars running inches apart through every corner, neither willing to give ground. The crowd was on their feet. The timing screen showed the gap fluctuating by tenths of a second, lap after lap. And then the leader made a mistake coming out of turn 18, ran wide, and the Titan Velocity car swept through into first place. Ethan watched it happen on the monitor in the pit lane, feeling a familiar twist in his stomach. Titan Velocity was going to win. The team that fired him, the organization that called his work a waste, was about to claim another victory while his team sat in fourth place, fighting just to survive. Don't think about them, Sophie said, reading his expression. Focus on us. She was right. Fourth place was still a good result, points toward the championship. Proof that the team belonged at this level. But it wasn't winning. With 1 hour remaining, the car running third suffered an engine failure and pulled into the pits trailing smoke. Lucas inherited third position. Gap to second? Lucas asked over the radio. 42 seconds, Sophie replied. But he's on old tires. You're faster right now. Can we catch him? Sophie ran the numbers. Maybe, if we push hard and he doesn't pit again. Let's do it. Mason looked at Ethan. He's going to kill himself trying. I know, Ethan said, but he's right. This is our shot. Lucas dropped the hammer. Lap after lap, he carved tenths of a second off the gap to second place. His lines got sharper, his braking points later, his commitment through the fast corners absolute. The car responded beautifully, the VX engine pulling hard out of every turn, the chassis balanced and predictable, even as Lucas pushed it to the limit. 40 seconds, 35, 30. The team running second noticed what was happening and tried to respond, but their tires were gone and their driver was exhausted. Lucas was hunting them down like a predator closing on wounded prey. 25 seconds, 20, 15. 10 laps left, Sophie called. Gap is 12 seconds. Lucas didn't respond. He was completely in the zone, every ounce of focus locked on the car ahead. Ethan stood at the pit wall, hands gripping the rail, watching the timing screen. Around him, other teams had stopped what they were doing to watch the battle for second place unfold. Even the Titan Velocity crew was glancing over, aware that the underdog team from the back of the paddock was making another impossible charge. 10 seconds. 8. 6. With 3 laps remaining, Lucas caught the car in second place coming onto the main straight. He pulled alongside, the two cars running door to door at nearly 200 miles per hour. They stayed side by side through turn 1, neither giving an inch. Then Lucas's engine pulled harder coming out of turn 2, and he cleared the other car before turn 3. Second place. The garage erupted. Mason was yelling into the radio. Sophie had her hands over her mouth. Ethan just stood there, barely able to believe what he was seeing. Bring it home, Ethan said quietly into the radio. Just bring it home. Lucas crossed the finish line in second place, 43 seconds behind the Titan Velocity car, 6 hours after the green flag dropped. When he climbed out of the cockpit, his race suit was soaked with sweat, and his hands were shaking so badly he could barely unfasten his helmet. Mason and Sophie caught him as his bad leg nearly gave out, helping him sit down on the pit wall. You stupid bastard, Mason said, half laughing, half crying. You actually did it. Lucas just nodded, too exhausted to speak. Ethan walked over and crouched down beside him. How's the leg? Hurts like hell, Lucas admitted, but it held. We're getting you to a doctor after this. After the podium ceremony, Lucas corrected him. Ethan smiled. After the podium ceremony? The ceremony itself was surreal. Lucas stood on the second place step, still in his race suit, flanked by the Titan Velocity driver who'd won and the third-place finisher from a factory team with a budget 10 times larger than theirs. Cameras flashed, champagne sprayed. The crowd cheered, and somewhere in that crowd, Ethan saw Victoria Hale watching from the Titan Velocity pit area, her expression unreadable. After the ceremony, after the interviews, after the other teams packed up and left, Ethan's team sat together in their garage bay, exhausted and elated and still processing what they'd accomplished. Second place, Mason said, shaking his head, at a 6-hour race against factory teams. Third in the championship standings now, Sophie added, checking her laptop. If we finish strong in the last 2 races, we could still make the podium for the season. We need to talk about Lucas's leg, Ethan said. Lucas, who'd been sitting quietly with an ice pack on his knee, looked up. My leg is fine. It's not fine, Ethan replied, and you know it. We need to figure something out before the next race. Like what? Finding another driver? Good luck with that. We'll figure it out. There's nothing to figure out, Lucas said, his voice harder now. I've been driving through pain my whole career. This is no different. This is different. Ethan shot back. You're not racing for a factory team with medical staff and backup drivers. You're racing for us. And if you hurt yourself permanently because you're too stubborn to admit you need help, that's on me. Lucas stared at him. You think I don't know what's at stake? You think I don't understand what this team means? I'm 41 years old, Ethan. This is my last shot at doing something that matters. So, yeah, my leg hurts. Yeah, 6-hour races are brutal, but I'm not walking away from this just because it's hard. The garage fell silent. Finally, Sophie spoke up. What if we managed it better? Adjusted the seat position, added more support, maybe some different padding. We can't fix the injury, but we can make it easier to deal with. Well, Lucas considered that. You think that'll help? I think it's worth trying. Mason nodded. And we talked to a sports medicine guy. Off the record. Get some professional advice on how to prevent making it worse. Lucas looked around at the 3 of them, then sighed. All right, fine, but I'm still driving the next race. Nobody said you weren't, Ethan replied. They spent the rest of the evening going over the car, checking for damage, making notes about what needed attention before the next race. It was mundane work, but there was comfort in the routine. The familiar rhythm of wrenches turning, parts being inspected, the quiet conversation of people who'd learned to work together through trial and error. Ethan's phone buzzed around 10 o'clock. A text from an unknown number. Congratulations on second place. That was impressive. We should talk. Victoria. Ethan stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. The 6th race of the season was at Ridgemont Park, a historic circuit that had been hosting races since the 1960s. It was a driver's track, technical, unforgiving, with elevation changes that tested both car and driver. The race was 4 hours long, and the forecast called for rain in the final stint. Sophie had managed to get Lucas an appointment with a sports medicine specialist who'd worked with professional athletes. The doctor couldn't fix the old injury, but he provided exercises for strength and flexibility, recommended a custom knee brace, and gave Lucas a realistic assessment of what he could and couldn't do without risking permanent damage. You can keep racing, the doctor had said, but you need to be smart about it. No more 6-hour stints. No more pushing through pain until you can't walk. And if something feels wrong, you stop immediately. Lucas agreed to follow the recommendations. The team adjusted the cockpit seating, added support in the right places, and made sure Lucas had everything he needed to manage the discomfort. It helped. Not completely, but enough. The race itself was a chess match. Lucas started 6th and drove cautiously through the opening stint, conserving tires and staying out of trouble. The rain came in hour 3, exactly as predicted, and suddenly the entire race was thrown into chaos. Cars spun off track. Pit strategies went out the window as teams scrambled to switch to rain tires. The safety car came out 3 times in 30 minutes as crews cleaned up debris and recovered stranded cars. And through it all, Lucas drove like someone who'd spent 20 years learning how to race in the rain. He picked off positions one by one as other drivers struggled with grip and visibility. 5th place. 4th. 3rd. The VX engine's smooth power delivery gave him an advantage in the slippery conditions. He could modulate the throttle with precision, while other drivers fought wheel spin and instability. With 20 minutes remaining, Lucas was running second behind a factory team car that was faster in the dry but struggling in the wet. He's making mistakes, Sophie said, watching the telemetry. Missing apexes, running wide. He's scared of the conditions. Gap? Ethan asked. 4 seconds, in closing. Lucas caught the leader with 10 minutes left, diving inside at turn 7, holding his line as the other driver backed out of the challenge. Lucas took the lead and never gave it back. He crossed the finish line in first place. First place. The garage exploded. Mason was screaming. Sophie was crying. Ethan stood there in the rain, watching their car cross the line ahead of every other team, ahead of the factory operations, and the professional drivers and the organizations with unlimited budgets. They'd won. Lucas brought the car back to the paddock and sat in the cockpit for a long moment, helmet still on, not moving. When he finally climbed out, his face was streaked with tears and rain. "We won," he said, like he couldn't quite believe it. "Yeah," Ethan replied. "We won. Ba. The victory ceremony was everything Ethan never let himself imagine during the long nights in his garage, during the months after Victoria fired him, during all the times when the dream seemed impossible. Lucas stood on the top step of the podium, holding the trophy above his head while the crowd cheered. Mason and Sophie flanked Ethan at the base of the podium, all of them soaked and exhausted and grinning like idiots. And when Ethan glanced toward the Titan Velocity pit area, he saw Victoria Hale standing alone, watching the ceremony with an expression that might have been respect. The media coverage after Ridgemont Park was intense. The underdog story had reached critical mass. Every racing publication wanted interviews. Sponsors who'd ignored them before were suddenly calling with partnership offers. Social media exploded with people sharing the race highlights, celebrating the single father who built an engine in his garage and took down the establishment. But with the attention came pressure. "We're second in the championship now," Sophie said during a team meeting the week after Ridgemont. "One race left. If we finish ahead of the Vanguard racing car, we take second place for the season. If we finish ahead of Titan Velocity, we win the whole thing." "That's a big if," Mason said. "Titan's been consistent all year. They're not going to make mistakes in the final race." "Neither will we," Lucas said. Ethan looked at the championship standings on Sophie's laptop. Titan Velocity Racing led by 18 points. His team was second. Vanguard Racing was third, only 6 points behind them. The final race was at Clearwater Speedway, a high-speed oval circuit that demanded maximum engine performance and perfect reliability. It was a 3-hour sprint race. No rain, no strategy games, just pure speed. "We need to win," Ethan said quietly. "Anything less than a win, and we lose the championship." "Can the engine handle it?" Lucas asked. Ethan thought about the VX system, about the 18 months of development, about every test and failure and breakthrough that led to this moment. "Yeah, he said, "it can handle it." The final 2 weeks before Clearwater were the most intense of Ethan's life. He tore down the engine one more time, replaced every wear component, checked every tolerance, made sure everything was perfect. Sophie ran simulations until she knew every possible scenario. Mason coordinated with sponsors and managed logistics. Lucas trained, worked with the sports medicine specialist, and prepared himself mentally for the race that would define their season. Lily came to visit the garage one afternoon after school, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her face curious as she looked around at the organized chaos. "Is this the car you're racing?" she asked, running her hand along the body panels. "Yeah," Ethan said. "This is it." "It looks fast." "It is fast." Lily was quiet for a moment. "Are you scared?" Ethan crouched down beside her. "Yeah, kiddo, a little bit. Because you might lose? Because I might fail. There's a difference." Yes. Lily frowned, thinking about that. "But you already won a race, so you didn't fail." "That's true. But this is the championship. This is everything we've been working toward." "Then you won't fail," Lily said, with the absolute certainty only an 8-year-old could muster. "Because you're the best engineer in the world." Ethan smiled and pulled her into a hug. "I love you, kiddo." "I love you too, Dad." The team arrived at Clearwater Speedway 3 days before the race. The paddock was electric with tension. Everyone knew what was at stake. The championship would be decided here, on this track, in 3 hours of flat-out racing. Ethan walked the circuit alone the night before the race, studying the banking, feeling the rough surface under his boots, trying to visualize Lucas pushing the car through turn after turn at 200 miles per hour. The VX engine could handle the speed. He believed that. But Clearwater was brutal on equipment, and one small failure would end everything. He was standing at the start-finish line when he heard footsteps behind him. Victoria Hale walked up and stood beside him, looking out at the empty grandstands. "Hell of a season you've had," she said. "Thanks. I mean it. What you've built is remarkable." Ethan glanced at her. "Why are you here, Victoria?" "Because tomorrow, one of us is going to win the championship. And I wanted to say something before that happens." "What?" Victoria took a breath. "I was wrong. About the VX project, about you, about everything. I let pressure from the board and fear of failure cloud my judgment. And I fired the best engineer I ever had because I couldn't see past quarterly reports and investor presentations." Ethan didn't respond. "You proved me wrong," Victoria continued. "You, in every possible way. And I want you to know that I respect what you've accomplished here." "That doesn't change what happened," Ethan said quietly. "I know, but I'm hoping it's a start." They stood in silence for a moment, two people who'd been enemies and might never be friends but had reached something close to understanding. "Good luck tomorrow," Victoria said finally. "You too." She walked away, leaving Ethan alone under the track lights with his thoughts and the weight of everything that was coming. Race morning arrived with clear skies and temperatures already climbing toward 90 degrees by 8 o'clock. Ethan had barely slept, his mind running through scenarios and contingencies until exhaustion finally pulled him under for a few restless hours. He was back in the garage by dawn, going through pre-race checks one more time even though he'd done them twice the night before. Mason found him torquing cylinder head bolts that didn't need adjustment. "You're going to strip the threads," Mason said gently. Ethan set down the wrench. "I know. The car's ready, the engine's perfect. You've done everything you can do." "Doesn't feel like enough." "It never does." Mason pulled up a stool and sat down. "You remember the first time we worked together? Regional circuit race. You were still driving back then. Your engine blew in practice and you spent all night rebuilding it with parts from 3 different junkyards." "We finished 8, Ethan said. "We finished. That's what mattered. You've been doing this your whole life, man. Building things that shouldn't work and making them work anyway. Today's no different. Today's the championship. So what? It's still just a race. Lucas drives the car, the engine either holds together or it doesn't, and we deal with whatever happens." Mason stood up and clapped Ethan on the shoulder. "But between you and me, that engine's going to sing today. I can feel it." Ethan managed a tired smile. "You're full of shit, you know that?" "Yeah, but I'm right." Sophie arrived an hour later with coffee and breakfast sandwiches nobody had the stomach to eat. She set up her laptop and began running final system checks, monitoring oil pressure and coolant temperature as the engine warmed up. Her hands were steady, but Ethan could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she kept glancing at the championship standings displayed on a secondary screen. "Second place is still good," she said suddenly. "If something goes wrong today, we still had an incredible season." "We're not here for second place," Lucas said from across the garage. He was already in his race suit, doing stretches to loosen up his bad leg. "We came here to win the whole damn thing. I'm just saying we should be realistic." "So, realistic?" Lucas laughed, but there wasn't much humor in it. "Nothing about this team is realistic. We built a championship car in a garage with borrowed tools and spite. We're racing against teams with 50 times our budget, and we're one race away from beating all of them. So no, Sophie, I'm not interested in being realistic today." Sophie looked like she wanted to argue, but Ethan caught her eye and shook his head slightly. Lucas was right, in his own blunt way. They'd stopped being realistic the moment Ethan decided to keep working on the VX project after getting fired. Realistic would have been finding a stable job and forgetting about racing. Realistic would have been safe and practical and completely wrong. "Let's go over the strategy one more time," Ethan said, pulling everyone together around Sophie's laptop. The championship math was straightforward but unforgiving. Titan Velocity led by 18 points. If they finished first or second today, they won the championship regardless of what anyone else did. If they finished third or worse, Ethan's team needed to win the race to claim the title. Vanguard Racing was only 6 points behind Ethan's team in third place. If they outscored Ethan's team by 7 points or more, they'd steal second place in the championship. It was a three-way battle with no room for error. Our biggest advantage is straight-line speed, Sophie said, pulling up telemetry data from practice sessions. The VX engine has about 40 horsepower on the Titan Velocity car and 60 on Vanguard. We're fastest on the straights, but we give back time in the corners because our chassis isn't as refined. So we need track position, Lucas said. We need track position, Sophie confirmed. If we can get to the front early and control the pace, we make this a race about engine performance. That's where we're strongest. What about tire wear, Molas? Mason asked. We're middle of the pack, not the best, not the worst. Figure 3 stops minimum, maybe 4 depending on how hard we push. Lucas nodded, processing the information. So the plan is qualify well, get to the front fast, and don't make mistakes. That's the plan, Ethan said. Sounds simple. It won't be. Qualifying took place at noon under a brutal sun that turned the track surface into something close to a frying pan. The cars went out one by one, each driver getting 3 flying laps to set their best time. The field was tight. The difference between pole position and 10th place was less than 0.8 of a second. Ethan stood at the pit wall with headphones on, listening to Lucas breathe through the radio as he pushed the car to its absolute limit. The first lap was good. The second was better. The third was the one that mattered. Lucas came screaming down the front straight, the engine note rising to a howl as he approached 200 miles per hour. He braked impossibly late into turn 1, the car twitching as it fought for grip on the banking, then accelerated hard through turn 2. Ethan watched the sector times flash across the screen. Purple, purple, purple. Fastest in every sector. Lucas crossed the line and the final time posted. Sophie grabbed Ethan's arm, her grip tight enough to hurt. Provisional pole, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Provisional pole. They'd sit on the front row unless someone beat their time in the remaining sessions. 6 cars still had to qualify. The next 2 were slower. The third was close but fell short by 0.2. Then the Vanguard racing car went out and threw down a lap that matched Lucas's time exactly, identical to 3 decimal places. Tie goes to whoever said it first, Mason said. We keep pole. But the Titan Velocity car still hadn't qualified. Victoria's driver went out for his final attempt with 10 minutes remaining in the session. He was smooth and fast, hitting his marks with professional precision. Ethan watched the sector times with his stomach twisted in knots. First sector, 300 slower than Lucas. Second sector, 200ths faster. Third sector, 100th slower. The final time posted. The Titan Velocity car had qualified second, just 400ths of a second behind Lucas. They'd start on the front row together. Well, Lucas said over the radio, breathing hard. This should be interesting. The 3 hours before the race were the longest of Ethan's life. The team went through their pre-race routine in mechanical silence. Each person focused on their specific tasks, trying not to think too much about what was coming. Ethan checked the engine one final time, inspecting every connection, every sensor, every component that could fail and end their championship hopes. Everything looked perfect. That somehow made it worse. Lily called at 2 o'clock, her voice excited and nervous over the phone. Are you going to win, Dad? I don't know, kiddo. We're going to try. Mason said you got pole position. That's good, right? That's very good. Then you're going to win. She said it with such certainty that Ethan almost believed her. Can I stay up and watch the race on TV? It's a school night. Dad, it's the championship. Ethan smiled despite his nerves. All right, you can stay up, but just this once. Yes, I'm going to tell everyone at school tomorrow that my dad won the championship. Hold on, we haven't won yet. You're going to win, Lily interrupted. I know you are. Love you, Dad. Love you too, kiddo. The call ended and Ethan stood there for a moment, phone in hand, trying to hold on to that feeling of certainty his daughter had given him. Then Victoria Hale walked into their garage bay. Mason saw her first and tensed, but Ethan waved him off. Victoria looked different than she had the night before. More formal, back in CEO mode, her expression carefully neutral. Can we talk? She asked Ethan. Privately? They stepped outside into the paddock, away from the noise and activity of race preparation. Victoria waited until they were alone before speaking. I'm withdrawing my offer, she said. The one I made about bringing you back to Titan velocity. Us. Ethan hadn't been expecting that. Why? Because I've been watching your team all season, and I realized something. Victoria paused, choosing her words carefully. You don't need Titan velocity. You don't need corporate structure or board oversight or any of the things I thought were necessary for success. What you need is exactly what you have. People who believe in the work and each other. So what changed? I did. Victoria looked back toward the Titan Velocity Transporter where her team was preparing their car with military efficiency. I built that organization to be lean and profitable and competitive. And it is all those things. But it's not what you have. Your team has something I can't manufacture or buy. And trying to absorb that into Titan Velocity would destroy the very thing that makes you special. Ethan didn't know what to say. I'm still going to beat you today, Victoria continued, a slight smile crossing her face. But I wanted you to know that regardless of how this race ends, you've already won something more important than a championship. What's that? You proved that innovation doesn't need permission, that sometimes the best ideas come from people everyone else dismisses, and that being right matters more than being safe. She held out her hand. Thank you for that. Ethan shook her hand. You're welcome. Victoria walked back toward her team, leaving Ethan standing alone in the paddock with 30 minutes until the race began. The grid formation was chaos orchestrated by officials with radios and clipboards. 40 cars lined up in precise rows, engines idling, crews making final adjustments before being forced to clear off. Ethan stood beside Lucas's car, one hand resting on the roll cage, feeling the vibration of the VX engine running at idle. You good? He asked Lucas. Lucas looked up through the window net, his eyes sharp and focused behind the helmet visor. I'm good. Remember the plan. Get to the front, control the pace, don't do anything stupid. When have I ever done anything stupid? You want the list chronologically or alphabetically? Yeah. Lucas laughed. Fair point. Listen, Ethan, whatever happens today, I want you to know something. This has been the best season of my career. Not because we won races or made headlines. Because I got to drive a car that you built with your own hands. That means something. Ethan's throat tightened. Bring it home, Lucas. Count on it. Wookie. The officials began clearing the grid. Ethan walked back to the pit wall where Mason and Sophie were setting up the timing equipment and radio systems. Around them, the grandstands were packed with spectators, the biggest crowd Clearwater had seen in years. Word had spread about the championship battle, about the underdog team challenging the establishment. The pace car pulled away. The field rolled forward, engines rising from idle to a coordinated howl. Lucas and the Titan Velocity driver sat side by side on the front row, two cars separated by inches and 18 championship points. The starter stood on the flag stand, green flag in hand. Ethan's heart was hammering so hard he could barely breathe. The flag dropped. Lucas launched off the line with perfect throttle control, the VX engine pulling hard as he accelerated into turn 1. The Titan Velocity car tried to go around the outside but didn't have the speed. Lucas held the inside line and came out of turn 2 with the lead. Behind them, the pack compressed into chaos. 3 cars went side by side into turn 3. Someone got loose and backed into the wall, triggering a yellow flag before they'd completed the first lap. Stay calm, Sophie said over the radio. Safety car's out. We'll go green again in a few laps. Lucas tucked in behind the safety car, holding position while the officials cleared the damaged car off the track. The restart came on lap 6, and Lucas nailed it, gapping the Titan Velocity car by 3 car lengths before they reached turn 1. Good restart, Mason said. Build the gap. Lap after lap, Lucas extended his lead. 5 car lengths. 8, 10. The VX engine was untouchable on the straights, pulling so hard that the Titan Velocity car couldn't even draft close enough to attempt a pass. Ethan watched the telemetry data on Sophie's laptop. Temperatures perfect, oil pressure solid, everything running exactly as designed. Gap to second? Lucas asked on lap 20. 2.4 seconds, Sophie replied. Gap to Vanguard in third is 6.1. Where's Titan in the points if we finish like this? Sophie did the math quickly. If positions hold, we win the championship by 9 points. Lucas didn't respond, but Ethan could imagine the grin behind the helmet. The first pit stops came on lap 45. Lucas dove into the pits from the lead, and the crew executed a clean stop. 4 tires, fuel, 12.3 seconds. He came out in second place behind cars that hadn't pitted yet. But once the cycle completed, he'd regained the lead. The Titan Velocity car pitted 2 laps later and came out 0.6 of a second behind Lucas. The gap stabilized around 1.2 seconds for the next 30 laps. Close enough that the Titan Velocity driver could see Lucas ahead, far enough that he couldn't make a serious challenge. It was a chess match played at 200 miles per hour, Lucas managing tire wear and fuel consumption, the Titan driver looking for any mistake he could exploit. On lap 97, Lucas got held up by a slower car in traffic. The Titan Velocity driver closed to within half a second. "He's right behind you, Sophie warned. Stay focused." Lucas cleared the slower car on lap 99 and immediately gapped the Titan driver again. But the moment had shown a weakness. Traffic could be the equalizer that Titan Velocity needed. The second round of pit stops came on lap 110. Lucas pitted from the lead again, and this time the stop was slower, 13.8 seconds. Not bad, but not perfect. He came out nose to tail with the Titan Velocity car, which had pitted a lap earlier and gotten a lightning-fast stop. They were side by side going into turn 1. Neither driver backed off. They ran door-to-door through turn 1 and turn 2, Lucas on the inside, Titan on the outside, both cars inches from the wall. Coming out of turn 2, Lucas's engine pulled harder and he cleared the Titan car by half a length before turn 3. "That was too close," Mason said over the radio. "I'm fine," Lucas replied, his voice tight. "Don't race him. Manage the gap and bring it home." He's not making this easy. Nobody said it would be. For the next 20 laps, the Titan Velocity car stayed within 1 second of Lucas, close enough to pressure, but not close enough to make a move. The driver was good, veteran smooth, hitting consistent lap times, waiting for Lucas to make a mistake. Lucas didn't make mistakes. On lap 40, the Vanguard racing car, running third, suffered a catastrophic engine failure. Oil dumped onto the track surface in turn 4, creating a massive hazard. The safety car came out immediately. "Shit," Sophie said. "This changes everything." The safety car bunched up the entire field, erasing the gaps between cars. When they went back to green, it would be a restart with Lucas and the Titan Velocity car right next to each other, fighting for position with 40 laps remaining. "We need to pit under yellow," Mason said. "Negative," Sophie replied, checking the numbers. "If we pit now, we'll have to stop again. We need to stay out and hope we can make it to the end on these tires." "That's asking a lot." "I know." Ethan watched the safety car circulate, his mind running through scenarios. If they pitted and everyone else stayed out, they'd lose track position and have to fight through traffic. If they stayed out and the tires gave up, they'd fade backward and lose the championship. There was no safe choice. "Stay out," Ethan said into the radio. "We trust the tires." The restart came on lap 152 with 48 laps remaining. Lucas held the inside line, the Titan Velocity car pulled alongside on the outside, and they accelerated toward turn 1 with the entire championship on the line. Lucas got to the corner first by half a car length and held the position through turn 2. The Titan driver tried to go around the outside again but didn't have the momentum. Lucas pulled ahead by 2 car lengths and started building a gap, but the tires were wearing faster now. The safety car period had cleaned up the racing surface, giving the track more grip and putting extra stress on the rubber. Ethan could see it in the lap times. Lucas was losing 0.2 per lap compared to his precaution pace. "Talk to me about the tires," Mason said. "They're sliding," Lucas replied. "I can feel it in turn 3 and turn 4, but they're holding. Can you make it to the end?" "I'm going to have to." Lap by lap, the Titan Velocity car started closing the gap. 1.8 seconds, 1.6, 1.4. The Titan driver was managing his tires better, being smoother, making them last. Lucas was having to fight the car through every corner, scrubbing speed, losing time. With 20 laps remaining, the gap was down to 1 second. With 15 laps remaining, it was 0.6. "He's coming," Sophie said quietly, staring at the screen. Ethan didn't respond. There was nothing he could do now. The engine was perfect, the car was perfect, but the tires were dying and there was no way to fix it. Lucas was going to have to hold off the Titan Velocity car on worn rubber for 15 more laps, and everyone watching knew it wasn't sustainable. With 10 laps remaining, the Titan driver was within 0.4 of a second, close enough to see a line, close enough to start looking for opportunities. Just hold him off, Ethan said into the radio. 10 more laps. I'm trying, Lucas said through gritted teeth. Lap 180, gap 3/10. Lap 181, gap 2/10. Lap 182. The Titan Velocity car pulled alongside, coming onto the front straight, trying to use the draft to slingshot past. Lucas blocked the inside line, forcing the Titan driver to brake early. The Titan car tucked back in behind, waiting for the next opportunity. 7 laps remaining. Lucas's tires were shot now. He was sliding through every corner, fighting to keep the car pointed in the right direction, losing chunks of time. The only thing keeping him ahead was the raw power of the VX engine on the straights. Every time the Titan driver got close in the corners, Lucas would pull away down the straight by sheer horsepower. But it wasn't enough. With 5 laps to go, the Titan Velocity car pulled alongside again in turn 3. They ran side by side through turn 4, neither giving ground, both cars on the absolute limit of grip. Coming onto the front straight, Lucas's worn tires broke loose for just a moment, and the Titan car surged ahead by a nose. They crossed the start-finish line with the Titan Velocity car in the lead by less than a car length. Fuck, Mason said. Ethan felt his stomach drop. 4 laps remaining and they just lost the lead. If it ended like this, Titan Velocity won the championship. Lucas, Ethan said quietly into the radio, it's not over. I know. Lucas stayed glued to the Titan car's rear bumper, using every bit of aerodynamic draft to stay close. The Titan driver was smooth and consistent, not making mistakes, controlling the race with veteran precision. 3 laps remaining, 2 laps remaining. Coming into turn 1 on the final lap, Lucas dove to the inside, braking impossibly late, asking everything from tires that had nothing left to give. The Titan driver took the defensive line, blocking the inside. Lucas had to back out or they'd both crash. He backed out. They came onto the back straight with the Titan car still in the lead. The VX engine pulled hard, closing the gap, but there were only 3 corners left in the race, and the Titan driver knew exactly what he was doing. Turn 3. Lucas tried the outside line but couldn't make it work. Turn 4. The last corner of the race. Lucas took a line nobody expected, going low on the banking where the grip was terrible but the distance was shorter. His worn tires screamed in protest. The car twitched sideways, nearly spinning. But somehow Lucas caught it, kept his foot down, and came off turn 4 right alongside the Titan Velocity car. They accelerated toward the finish line, side by side, both engines howling, neither driver willing to lift. Ethan couldn't breathe. The crowd was on its feet. The 2 cars crossed the finish line at nearly 200 miles per hour, so close together that the timing system needed 3 photo cameras to determine the winner. Then, the result posted. Lucas had won. By 7/1000ths of a second. 7/1000ths. The garage erupted. Mason was screaming. Sophie was sobbing. Ethan stood frozen at the pit wall, staring at the timing screen, not quite believing what he was seeing. They'd won the race. They'd won the championship. Lucas brought the car back around for a cool-down lap, then stopped on the front straight and climbed out. He pulled off his helmet and just stood there on top of the car, arms raised, letting the crowd noise wash over him. Ethan ran out onto the track with Mason and Sophie right behind him. They reached the car and Lucas jumped down, his bad leg nearly giving out, but Mason caught him, and suddenly they were all holding each other up, laughing and crying and trying to process what they'd just accomplished. "You did it," Ethan said, his voice cracking. "You actually did it." "We did it," Lucas corrected him. "All of us," said. The celebration that followed was a blur. The victory lane ceremony with champagne and trophies. The interviews where Ethan tried to explain what the championship meant and couldn't find words big enough. The other teams coming over to offer congratulations, even the ones they'd beaten. And Victoria Hale, standing at the edge of the celebration, watching with an expression that might have been pride. She caught Ethan's eye across the crowd and nodded once. Ethan nodded back. Later, after the chaos died down and the track emptied, Ethan called Lily from the now quiet garage. "Did you win?" she asked before he could say hello. "Yeah, kiddo, we won." "I knew it! I knew you would. Everyone at school is going to be so jealous tomorrow." Ethan smiled, exhausted and elated and still processing everything. "I couldn't have done it without you cheering me on." I know," Lily said matter-of-factly. "That's what good luck charms do. When are you coming home? Yeek. Tomorrow. We have to pack up everything here first. Okay. I love you, Dad. I love you too. The call ended, and Ethan sat alone in the garage, surrounded by the tools and equipment and the car that had changed everything. Mason and Sophie were handling media obligations. Lucas was getting his leg looked at by the medical staff. For the first time all day, Ethan had a moment of quiet to let it all sink in. They'd built something impossible in a garage with borrowed money and stubborn belief. They'd taken on factory teams with unlimited resources and beaten them. They'd proven that innovation and determination could overcome almost anything. But more than that, they'd shown his daughter that dreams were worth chasing even when everyone said they were impossible. Especially then. Ethan closed his eyes and allowed himself to feel something he hadn't felt in nearly 2 years. Peace. The quiet didn't last long. By the time Ethan, Mason, Sophie, and Lucas made it back to the hotel that night, Ethan's phone had accumulated 47 missed calls and over 100 text messages. Sponsors wanting meetings, journalists requesting interviews, racing organizations offering contracts. The championship victory had turned them from an interesting underdog story into something bigger, a legitimate operation that people wanted to be part of. Mason scrolled through the messages on his own phone, shaking his head. We're going to need an actual office, maybe a secretary. Hell, maybe a whole staff. One thing at a time, Ethan said, but he was thinking the same thing. The team had grown beyond what 4 people could manage out of a garage. If they wanted to compete again next season, and the messages made it clear that people expected them to, they'd need real infrastructure. Sophie was already 3 steps ahead, her laptop open on the hotel room desk, building spreadsheets and organizational charts. We need to decide what we want this to be. Do we stay independent? Do we partner with a manufacturer? Do we start building engines for other teams? Let's get through tonight first, Lucas said from the couch, his bad leg propped up on pillows with fresh ice packs. The race had taken everything out of him. The sports medicine specialist had warned him after examining him in victory lane that he'd pushed too far, that the knee needed serious rest, or he'd be looking at surgery. Lucas had just nodded and kept celebrating. They ordered room service and sat together in exhausted silence, picking at food none of them had the appetite for, still processing what they'd accomplished. The championship trophy sat on the table between them, physically real, but somehow still feeling impossible. You know what's weird? Mason said after a while. This doesn't feel how I thought it would feel. What do you mean? Sophie asked. I don't know. I thought winning a championship would be this huge moment where everything changes and you feel different, but I just feel tired. That's because you're tired, Lucas said. We all are. Give it a few days. It'll hit you. But Ethan understood what Mason meant. The victory was real, the trophy was real, but it didn't erase the 18 months of struggle that came before it. It didn't magically fix Lucas's leg or restore the money they'd spent or give back the time Ethan had missed with Lily while working late nights in the garage. The championship was the reward, but it wasn't a cure for everything that had been difficult about getting there. That realization should have been disappointing. Instead, Ethan found it oddly comforting. They'd won without losing themselves in the process. They were still the same people who'd started this journey, just with a better story to tell. I'm going to bed, Lucas announced, levering himself off the couch with a grimace. Wake me up when I'm famous. You're already famous, Sophie said. Then wake me up when I'm rich. He limped off to his room, leaving the other 3 sitting in the quiet. He needs to see a surgeon, Sophie said quietly. That knee isn't going to heal on its own. I know, Ethan replied, but Lucas is stubborn. So are you. Maybe that's why you work so well together. Mason stood and stretched, his back cracking. I'm calling it too. Big day tomorrow dealing with all this. He gestured vaguely at their phones. We're going to need to make some decisions about what comes next. After Mason left, Sophie and Ethan sat alone in the hotel room with the championship trophy between them. Can I ask you something? Sophie said. Sure. Was it worth it? All of it. Getting fired, the financial stress, almost losing everything. Was it worth it for this? Ethan thought about that question for a long time. No, he said finally. It wasn't worth it for this. Sophie looked confused. It was worth it because I proved to myself that I could finish what I started, Ethan continued. The championship is great, but what mattered more was showing Lily that when you believe in something, you don't quit just because it gets hard. That's the lesson I needed her to learn. And I couldn't teach her that by giving up. Sophie nodded slowly. That makes sense. What about you? Was it worth leaving Titan Velocity? Absolutely. Sophia didn't hesitate. Working with Victoria was slowly killing everything I loved about engineering. I was so focused on not making mistakes that I stopped taking risks. Being part of this team reminded me why I wanted to be an engineer in the first place. They talked for another hour about the future, about possibilities and challenges and what they wanted to build next. Eventually, exhaustion won, and they said goodnight, leaving Ethan alone with the trophy and his thoughts. He texted Lily, even though she was probably asleep. We did it, kiddo. Can't wait to tell you all about it. The response came back immediately. I'm still awake. Tell me everything. Ethan smiled and called her instead. The drive home the next day took 8 hours through empty highway and desert landscape. They loaded the car onto the trailer, packed up the equipment, and left Clearwater behind. The championship trophy sat in the truck cab between Ethan and Mason, occasionally catching sunlight and throwing reflections across the dashboard. Victoria called me this morning, Mason said about 3 hours into the drive. Ethan glanced over. What did she want? To make an offer, a real one this time, not about buying us out. Mason kept his eyes on the road. She wants to hire us as an independent development partner. We keep ownership of the VX engine design, we maintain our team structure, but Titan Velocity provides funding and resources for R&D. We develop technology for them while still running our own racing program. What did you tell her? That I'd talk to you about it. Ethan watched the desert roll past outside the window. What do you think? I think it's a good deal, better than what we have now. We'd get real money, access to their fabrication facilities, support from their engineering department, and we wouldn't have to give up control. But we'd be tied to Victoria again. Yeah, we would. They drove in silence for a while. Let me think about it, Ethan said finally. Fair enough. In the back of the truck, Lucas was asleep with his leg elevated. Sophie was on her laptop, already fielding emails and coordinating sponsorship meetings for the following week. The championship had changed everything, but somehow the team dynamic felt exactly the same as it had in Mason's garage 6 months ago. That evening, they pulled into the shop and unloaded the car together. The building looked exactly as they'd left it, cramped, cluttered, familiar. But it felt different now, like they'd left as underdogs and come back as something else. We should celebrate, Mason said, looking at the car on the trailer. Have a party or something. Invite people. Let's do it next weekend, Sophie suggested. Give everyone time to recover first. Sounds good. Mason looked at Ethan. You good? Yeah, Ethan said. I'm good. I just want to go home and see my daughter. Then go. We'll handle the rest. Ethan drove home through familiar streets that felt different somehow, like the championship had changed the way light hit the buildings or the way the air moved through the trees. It was the same city he'd lived in his entire adult life, but he was seeing it with new eyes. Lily was waiting on the front porch when he pulled up. She ran down the driveway and jumped into his arms before he could even close the truck door. Ethan caught her and held on tight, feeling her skinny arms wrap around his neck, hearing her excited voice telling him how everyone at school wanted to hear about the race and how her teacher had shown the highlights video in class. You're a champion, Lily said, pulling back to look at him. A real champion. We're champions, Ethan corrected. The whole team. But you built the engine. That was the important part. Every part was important. That's what makes a team work. They went inside and Lily insisted on hearing the entire story from start to finish. Qualifying, the race strategy, the final lap battle, everything. Ethan told her the truth, not a simplified version. He talked about being scared, about the tires wearing out, about the moment when it looked like they might lose. But you didn't lose, Lily said, because you didn't give up. No, Ethan agreed. We didn't give up. Later that night, after Lily finally went to bed, Ethan sat alone in the kitchen with a beer and his phone. He scrolled through the messages, the offers, the opportunities that had appeared overnight. It was overwhelming. 6 months ago, they'd been scraping by on borrowed money and hope. Now everyone wanted a piece of what they'd built. One message stood out. It was from Victoria, sent earlier that evening. Congratulations again on the championship. The offer Mason mentioned is real, and I hope you'll consider it. But regardless of what you decide, I want you to know that watching your team this season changed how I think about leadership and innovation. You reminded me that the best ideas often come from people willing to take risks that others won't. Thank you for that. Victoria. Ethan read the message twice, then set down his phone without responding. He thought about Victoria, the woman who'd fired him, who'd called his work a fantasy, who'd represented everything wrong with corporate thinking. She wasn't a villain in this story. She was just someone who'd made a decision based on incomplete information and pressure she was under. She'd been wrong, but she'd also been willing to admit it. That took a kind of courage that was easy to overlook. The week that followed was chaos. Meetings with sponsors who wanted to be associated with the championship team. Journalists writing feature stories about the single father who built a racing empire in his garage. Offers from other racing series, other teams, other organizations that wanted the VX engine technology. Sophie coordinated most of it, building systems and schedules and making sure nobody got overwhelmed. Mason handled the business side, negotiating contracts and partnership terms. Lucas did interviews and public appearances despite the pain in his leg that he still refused to properly address. And Ethan tried to figure out what came next. On Thursday evening, he drove to the address Victoria had sent him, a restaurant downtown, quiet and expensive. The kind of place where business deals happened over wine and steak. Victoria was already there when he arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 glasses of water and a folder of documents. "Thanks for coming," she said as Ethan sat down. "Thanks for the invitation." They ordered food and made small talk until it arrived, dancing around the real conversation. Finally, Victoria opened the folder and slid it across the table. "This is the formal offer. Full terms, financial details, everything. Mason's seen a draft, but this is the final version." Ethan looked through the documents. The terms were generous, more than generous. Titan Velocity would provide $2 million in annual funding for R&D. They'd give the team access to their facilities and engineering resources. In exchange, Titan Velocity would get first rights to license any technology developed, with the team retaining ownership and the ability to use it in their own racing program. It was the kind of deal that would solve every financial problem they had. "This is a good offer," Ethan said carefully. "But you're not sure you want to take it." "I'm not sure I want to be tied to anyone right now. We just won the championship on our own terms. Part of me wants to keep it that way." Victoria nodded. "I understand that. And honestly, 6 months ago I would have pushed harder, tried to convince you this was the right move. But I've learned something watching your team." "What's that?" "That forcing innovation into a structure it doesn't fit destroys what makes it special. You built something remarkable because you had the freedom to fail. The moment you're working under someone else's expectations, even with the best intentions, that freedom disappears." Ethan was surprised by the honesty. "So why make the offer at all?" he asked. Was surprised because I think there's a version of this partnership that works for both of us, but only if you want it, and only if we structure it right. Victoria leaned forward. "I don't want to control your team, Ethan. I want to support it. There's a difference." Sorry, but she said. They talked for another hour, going through scenarios and possibilities, testing different versions of what a partnership might look like. Victoria was sharp and direct, no corporate double talk, just honest conversation about what each side needed and what they could offer. "I need to talk to my team," Ethan said finally. "Of course. Take your time. The offer stands regardless of how long you need to decide." Ethan stood to leave, then hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure, babe. Do you regret firing me?" Victoria didn't hesitate. "Every single day since I saw you win that race in the desert. It was the worst decision I made as CEO, and I've made plenty of bad ones." "Why?" "Because I let fear drive the decision instead of vision. I was so worried about quarterly reports and board pressure that I couldn't see the potential right in front of me, and I lost a good engineer because of it." Ethan nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, if you hadn't fired me, I probably never would have finished the engine. I needed to be angry enough to prove you wrong." Victoria smiled sadly. "I'm glad my mistake led to something good, but I'd still take it back if I could." They shook hands, and Ethan left, carrying the folder of documents and a new understanding of the person he'd spent 18 months resenting. The team meeting happened Saturday morning at Mason's garage. Everyone gathered around the workbench where they'd built the championship car, looking at the offer Victoria had made. $2 million, Lucas said, whistling low. That's real money. It is, Ethan agreed. But it comes with strings. We'd be partners with Titan Velocity, working with the company that fired me. Working with Victoria, Sophie corrected, not the company. There's a difference. Mason was reading through the contract terms, his reading glasses perched on his nose. The terms are solid. We keep ownership, we keep control, we just get resources and funding. I don't see a downside here. The downside is we lose independence, Ethan said. Once we take their money, we're obligated to deliver results. The moment this stops being fun and starts being a job, we risk becoming exactly what we were fighting against. The garage was quiet for a moment. Can I say something? Lucas asked. Go ahead. My knee is fucked, Lucas said bluntly. I need surgery, and after that I need probably 6 months of rehab. I'm not driving next season regardless of what we decide. And honestly, I'm okay with that. I got my championship. I got to drive the best car I've ever touched. But you guys are just getting started. He looked around at the team. You have something special here. An engine that's better than anything in racing, a team that works well together, and an opportunity to build something bigger. But you can't do it broken, exhausted, running out of a garage on hope and credit cards. You need resources, and this offer gives you that without selling your soul. What are you saying? Ethan asked. I'm saying take the deal. Build the next version of the team. Hire a new driver. Keep racing. Keep innovating. And let me be the old guy who comes around and tells stories about that one season we won the championship. Sophie was wiping her eyes. Mason was nodding slowly. Ethan looked at the 3 people who'd believed in him when nobody else would, who'd spent a year of their lives chasing an impossible dream, who'd become family through sweat and failure and eventual success. All right, he said finally. We take the deal, but we do it on our terms. We stay independent. We make our own decisions. And the moment it stops feeling right, we walk away. Agreed, Mason said. Agreed, Sophie echoed. Lucas just grinned. Now that's settled. Can we please throw that party we talked about? The celebration happened the following Saturday at Mason's garage. They invited everyone who'd been part of the journey, suppliers who'd given them credit when they needed parts, local sponsors who'd supported them early on, other racing teams who'd become friends and competitors. Even a few journalists who'd covered their story showed up with cameras and notebooks. Lily was there wearing a team t-shirt that was 3 sizes too big, running around showing everyone the championship trophy and telling anyone who'd listened that her dad was the best engineer in the world. Victoria Hale arrived around 7, alone, looking uncertain in a way Ethan had never seen before. She stood at the edge of the party for a moment before Sophie noticed and pulled her into the celebration. I didn't think you'd come, Ethan said when he finally made his way over to her. I wasn't sure I should, Victoria admitted, but Mason invited me, and I figured it was time to stop being the villain in this story. You were never the villain. I fired you, Ethan. That makes me at least a little bit villainous. You made a decision you thought was right, and yeah, it hurt, but it also pushed me to finish something I might have given up on otherwise. Ethan glanced around the garage, at the people laughing and celebrating. So maybe it worked out the way it was supposed to. Victoria followed his gaze. You built something special here, not just the engine, the team, the culture, the belief that impossible things are possible if you're willing to work for them. We built it together, Ethan corrected. Nobody does this alone. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the party unfold around them. I signed the partnership agreement, Ethan said. We're moving forward with the deal. Victoria looked at him, surprised. Really? Really. But I need you to understand something. This team works because everyone here believes in what we're doing. The moment it becomes about profits or investor returns or corporate strategy, we're done. I'll walk away and take the engine with me. Fair enough. Victoria held out her hand. To new partnerships and second chances. Ethan shook her hand. To innovation and taking risks. The party went late into the night. Mason gave a rambling speech about believing in crazy ideas and the people who chase them. Sophie showed off the technical innovations in the VX engine to anyone who'd listen. Lucas held court in the corner, telling racing stories and making people laugh despite the pain Ethan knew he was in. And Lily fell asleep on Ethan's shoulder around 10, exhausted from running around all evening, her small hand still clutching the championship trophy. Ethan carried her out to the truck, Mason walking beside him. "Hell of a season," Mason said quietly. "Hell of a season," Ethan agreed. "You think we can do it again?" "I don't know, but I think we can try." Mason smiled. "That's good enough for me." The months that followed brought changes, but the core of what they'd built remained the same. They signed the partnership with Titan Velocity and used the funding to move into a proper facility, a real workshop with modern equipment, office space for Sophie's growing engineering department, and a fabrication area where they could develop new technology. Mason officially became operations manager. Sophie was head of engineering. Lucas took a position as a consultant and driver coach, helping them find and train a new driver for the upcoming season. The VX engine technology became the foundation for a whole development program. Other teams wanted to license it. Manufacturers wanted to study it. What started as one impossible project turned into a portfolio of innovations that changed how people thought about racing engines. But success brought challenges, too. The new facility was expensive to maintain. The partnership with Titan Velocity came with expectations and deadlines. The pressure to repeat their championship success was constant. And more than once, Ethan found himself wondering if they'd lost something essential in the process of growing. One evening, about 6 months after the championship, Ethan was working alone in the new workshop when Lily came to visit after school. She walked around the facility, looking at the new equipment and organized workbenches, comparing it to the cramped garage where everything had started. "Do you like it here better?" she asked. "It's definitely easier to work," Ethan said. "We have better tools, more space. But do you like it better?" Ethan thought about that question. "I like what it represents," he said carefully. "It means we succeeded. It means the dream worked. But sometimes I miss how simple things were at the beginning, when it was just us in Mason's garage trying to prove something." "You can't go back, though," Lily observed with 8-year-old wisdom. "You have to keep going forward." "Yeah," Ethan agreed. "We do." "Is that scary?" "Sometimes, but that's how you know you're growing." Lily nodded, processing that. Then she asked the question that had been weighing on Ethan for weeks. "Are you happy, Dad?" Ethan looked around the workshop. "What's this?" Ethan looked at the championship banner hanging on the wall, at the prototype engines in various stages of development, at the evidence of everything they'd accomplished. "Yeah, kiddo," he said, realizing it was true. "I'm happy. Not because we won or because we have nice things now, but because I get to keep doing what I love with people I respect. That's all I really wanted." "Good," Lily smiled. "Because I'm proud of you. Even when you're scared or things are hard, I'm always proud of you." Marwu Masumot. Ethan felt his throat tighten. He pulled Lily into a hug and held on tight, grateful for this small human who'd believed in him even when he wasn't sure he believed in himself. The second racing season was different from the first. They had better equipment, a stronger team, more support. But they also had expectations. The underdog magic was gone. Now they were the team to beat, and everyone was gunning for them. The new driver they'd hired was talented but young, still learning, making mistakes that Lucas never would have made. They didn't win the championship that second year. They finished third, which was still impressive, but felt like a disappointment after what they'd accomplished before. And that was an important lesson too. Success wasn't about winning every time. It was about building something sustainable, something that could survive setbacks and failures, and the inevitable downs that came with the ups. The team that won the championship had been running on adrenaline and desperation and the unique energy of chasing an impossible dream. The team that finished third was learning how to be professionals, how to manage expectations, how to keep innovating even when the spotlight moved on to other stories. It wasn't as dramatic, but it was real. One evening near the end of that second season, the core team gathered in the workshop after everyone else had gone home. Ethan, Mason, Sophie, and Lucas sat around the same workbench where they'd built the original VX engine, drinking beer and talking about the future. "You know what's funny?" Sophie said. 2 years ago, all I wanted was to work on something that mattered. And now I run an engineering department, manage 6 people, and spend half my day in meetings. Sometimes I miss just being able to focus on the technical work. Welcome to success, Mason said. It's not what you think it'll be. Is that a bad thing? Lucas asked. No, Mason replied. Just different. You spend so much time chasing the goal that you don't really think about what comes after. Ethan understood exactly what they meant. The championship had been the culmination of everything they'd worked toward. But life didn't end at the finish line. It just kept going, presenting new challenges and opportunities and questions about what to do next. We could walk away, Ethan said quietly. We proved what we needed to prove. The engine works, the technology is validated, we won the championship. We could sell the company, take the money, and do something else. Is that what you want? Sophie asked. I don't know. Part of me wonders if we're holding on to something that's already peaked. I'ma seen but to meet. Lucas shook his head. The championship was never the point, man. The point was proving that innovation doesn't need permission. That people with good ideas and stubborn determination can compete with organizations that have every advantage. That's the work. The championship was just evidence that the work mattered. So what are you saying? I'm saying the story doesn't end with winning. It ends when you stop trying to build better things. And I don't think any of us are ready to stop yet. Mason raised his beer bottle. To building better things. To taking risks, Sophie added. To proving people wrong, Lucas said. To showing my daughter that dreams are worth chasing, Ethan finished. They clinked bottles and drank, 4 people who'd started as colleagues and become family through shared struggle and eventual triumph. The conversation shifted to lighter topics after that. Memories from the championship season, jokes about mistakes they'd made, speculation about what next year might bring. Eventually, Mason and Sophie headed home, leaving Ethan and Lucas alone in the workshop. How's the knee? Ethan asked. Better. The surgery helped. I can walk without pain now, which is a miracle compared to where I was. Lucas paused. I'm not coming back as a driver, though. I know we joked about it, but I'm done. That chapter's closed. No regrets? None. I got my storybook ending. One last championship run with a car that was better than anything I'd ever driven. How many people get that? Lucas looked at Ethan. But I do have one request. What's that? Keep building things that scare you. Don't let success make you cautious. The VX engine worked because you believed in it when everyone said it was impossible. Whatever comes next, make sure it's just as impossible. Ethan smiled. That's a pretty big request. You've handled bigger. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, surrounded by the tools and equipment that had transformed an impossible dream into reality. Years later, when Ethan looked back on that conversation, he realized Lucas had given him the most important advice anyone ever had. Success wasn't the end of the story. It was permission to attempt even bigger, even more impossible things. The work never stopped. The team continued innovating, developing new technology, pushing boundaries. Some projects succeeded brilliantly, others failed spectacularly. But they kept trying, kept building, kept believing that the next breakthrough was possible if they just worked hard enough. Sophie eventually left to start her own engineering consultancy, taking the lessons she'd learned and teaching them to a new generation of engineers who wanted to change their industries. Mason stayed on, running operations and mentoring young fabricators who came through the shop looking for opportunities. Lucas became a commentator for racing broadcasts, telling stories about the sport he loved and occasionally pointing out when he saw teams playing it too safe, not taking enough risks. And Victoria Hale transformed Titan Velocity Racing into something different than what it had been, an organization that valued innovation over quarterly profits, that gave engineers room to experiment and fail and try again. She credited Ethan's team for teaching her that lesson, and the two of them stayed in touch over the years, occasionally collaborating on projects that benefited both organizations. But through it all, Ethan kept coming back to that workshop, to the space where impossible things had first become possible. Lily grew up surrounded by engines and innovation. She learned to weld before she learned algebra. She spent weekends in the shop, asking questions and getting her hands dirty, and absorbing the belief that good ideas were worth fighting for. On her 16th birthday, Ethan took her out to the workshop after everyone else had left. I want to show you something, he said, pulling a dusty cardboard tube from storage. He unrolled the original VX engine blueprints on the workbench. The same drawings he'd packed up the day Victoria fired him, the same designs everyone said would never work. Lily studied them carefully, her engineer's eye already seeing patterns and possibilities. "This is where it started," Ethan said. "In a garage with no money and no support and everyone telling me I was wasting my time." "But you didn't give up," Lily said. "No, I didn't give up. And I want you to understand why." Ethan looked at his daughter, seeing echoes of himself in her determined expression. "Because the world is full of people who will tell you your ideas are impossible. They'll have good reasons. They'll point to budgets and timelines and all the logical reasons why you should play it safe. But sometimes impossible things are possible," Lily finished. "Sometimes, not always. You'll fail more than you succeed. You'll waste time and money on projects that don't work. You'll question whether it's worth it." Ethan paused. "But the alternative is spending your whole life wondering what might have been if you'd just tried." Lily nodded slowly, absorbing the lesson. "I want to be an engineer," she said. "Like you." "You can be anything you want," Ethan replied. "But if you do become an engineer, promise me something." "What?" "Build things that scare you. Take risks that feel impossible. And when people tell you it can't be done, prove them wrong." Lily smiled. "I promise." Lily smiled. They rolled up the blueprints and put them back in storage, preserving the evidence of where everything began. Later that night, alone in the workshop, Ethan thought about the journey that started with a firing in a cold conference room and ended with a championship trophy and a company that employed 40 people and technology that had changed an entire industry. But more than that, he thought about his daughter, about the lesson he'd managed to teach her not through words but through action, through refusing to quit when quitting would have been easier, through believing in something when nobody else would. That was the real victory. Not the championship, not the business success, not even the vindication of proving Victoria Hale wrong. The real victory was showing one small girl that impossible dreams were worth chasing, that failures were just lessons, and that the best things in life came from taking risks that terrified you. Because in the end, that's what innovation required. Not genius or resources or perfect conditions, just ordinary people with extraordinary belief, willing to fail 100 times for the chance to succeed once. And sometimes, if you got lucky and worked hard and refused to quit, that one success changed everything. Ethan turned off the workshop lights and headed home, leaving behind the engines and equipment and trophies that documented what they'd built. But he carried with him something more valuable than any of that. The knowledge that he'd done something that mattered, in a way that mattered, for the one person whose opinion counted most. The story didn't end with the championship. It ended with a father and daughter who understood that the best things in life came from taking chances, from believing in impossible ideas, and from never ever giving up on dreams that scared you. That was the lesson. That was the gift. And that was enough.